Good evening. Welcome to tonight's Kalamazoo City Commission meeting. I'm Deputy City Manager Jeff Chamberlain, and tonight's meeting is the Kalamazoo City Commission of Monday, December 6th, 2021. Tonight's meeting is being streamed live on the City of Kalamazoo's Facebook page as well as YouTube channel. You can listen in to tonight's meeting by calling area code 269-552-6425 and entering meeting ID number 886-2395-9559 when prompted. And you can also call and leave a public comment for tonight's meeting by calling area code 269-226-6573. And I'd like to get the meeting started with Mayor David Anderson.
Thank you very much, Deputy City Manager Chamberlain. I appreciate it. I'd like to call this business meeting of the Kalamazoo City Commission for Monday, December 6, 2021 to order and provide a warm welcome to all of you who I see here on my screen and all of you who are watching our Zoom style public City Commission meeting this evening. First item of business is Clerk Scott Borling. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Decker.
Present in the City of Kalamazoo.
Commissioner Hess.
Present in Kalamazoo.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Here in Kalamazoo.
Commissioner Juarez.
Present in the City of Kalamazoo.
Commissioner Pradle.
Present in the City of Kalamazoo.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
Present in the City of Kalamazoo.
Mayor Anderson.
Here in the City of Kalamazoo. Thank you, Clerk Borling. Tonight for our opening ceremony, we are honored to have Pastor James Harris Sr. from Trenches Community Church here to provide an invocation. Pastor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor David Anderson and the commission team, the elected officials, for allowing me to be a part of this tonight. I just want to go ahead and pray for you guys. So, Father, I just thank you, first of all, for our elected officials. Lord, you are the one that sets individuals in the offices of authority. And Lord, you have given authority for them to serve and to lead our community. So I thank you for giving them wisdom. I thank you for the unity amongst this team to work together so that your will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastor Harris. I appreciate you being with us here this evening.
You're welcome.
We have three proclamations to start off our regular agenda here. And the first one is recognizing the awesome Tammy Taylor and celebrating 21 years of service. And Commissioner Pradle will be reading that.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Commissioner Chris. Tammy, congratulations, by the way, and excited to read this for you. So this is a proclamation celebrating 21 years of service of Tammy Taylor. Tammy Taylor has worked as the executive director of the Edison Neighborhood Association for 21 years. Sorry, here I have a pop-up that keeps going up. Sorry about that, Tammy. Has worked as the executive director of the Edison Neighborhood Association for 21 years since 2000. Striving to continue its mission of empowering the Edison neighborhood to maximize quality of life and sense of community. And whereas Tammy has been a current and former board member of the Community Promise Credit Union, Silent Observer, Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing Services, Habitat for Humanity, Edison Business Association, Intrepid Professional Women's Network, Building Blocks, Salvation Army, County Community Action Agency, Hispanic American Council, and Goodwill Industries. And whereas Tammy has been a partner, leader, and champion for rehabilitating Washington Square and is an advocate for the underserved and under-resourced residents of the city. And whereas Tammy Taylor is principally responsible for the creation of the Edison Business Association and has created major partnerships with the Kalamazoo greenhouses, resulting in annual Edison Blossoms. She has led multiple Edison beautification projects, including various murals, many building block sites, housing rehabilitation projects, and Washington Square. And whereas in her 21 years of service, Tammy has been a leader, innovator, supporter of the Edison neighborhood and its residents. Now, therefore, I, Commissioner Chris Pradle on behalf of the 54th City Commission and David F. Anderson, Mayor of the City of Kalamazoo, do hereby recognize Tammy Taylor for her illustrious 21 years of service to the Edison community and her positive impact on the City of Kalamazoo.
Thank you, Commissioner Pradle. Ms. Taylor.
I'm not going to take up too much of your time. Thank you guys so very much. That is so very sweet of you all. I really appreciate it. It's been a joy working with the city most of the time. I won't lie. but thank you guys so much. And you guys have an awesome night, okay?
Great. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Taylor, and I appreciate your honesty. Our next proclamation this evening recognizes the 10th anniversary of the Kalamazoo County Ready Fours program. Kristen Buell Lepisto, there we go. I'm sorry. Lepisto, thank you. Is here. She's the executive director of KC Ready Fours, and she's present to receive the proclamation, which is going to be read by Commissioner Hess.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Jean Hess, and I'm just really delighted to be able to provide this proclamation. And Kristen, we are just so grateful for your presence in this community and leading this wonderful organization. And here we go. Celebrating Kalamazoo County Ready Fours 10th anniversary. Whereas Kalamazoo County Ready Fours, or KC Ready Fours, has impacted early childhood education in Kalamazoo County since its inception in 2011. And whereas over the past 10 years, the organization has worked to advance fully accessible, high quality pre-kindergarten education for every 3- and 4-year-old in Kalamazoo County through collaborative leadership with public and private partners. And whereas the work of KC Ready Fours has grown into three main areas: tuition assistance to income eligible families, high quality supports to partnering programs, and family supports through community partnerships to elevate the whole child. And whereas data from KC Ready Fours consistently show that children learn 1.5 times as much compared to children who do not have high quality pre-kindergarten experience. For minority students, the results are even stronger. Overall, minority children learn 2.2 times as much, and children from lower income families learn 1.8 times as much. And whereas 85% of an individual's social, emotional, and intellectual development occurs before the age of 5, and 90% of brain growth happens before kindergarten. And whereas supporting and retaining high quality and early educators is a priority. The impacts of pandemic-related staffing changes have been substantial. 87% of programs are experiencing staffing shortages, 49% are serving fewer children, 38% have a longer wait list, and 28% have reduced their operating hours. And whereas the primary partners of KC Ready Fours includes Kalamazoo RESA, which together with KC Ready Fours forms Kalamazoo County Pre-K, over 50 pre-K providers, the Family Health Center, Kalamazoo Public Library, Western Michigan University, and more who work together to maximize services to support families throughout Kalamazoo County. Now, therefore, I, Jean Hess, on behalf of the 54th City Commission and David F. Anderson, Mayor of the City of Kalamazoo, do hereby honor and recognize Kalamazoo County Ready Fours on this special milestone and encourage our community to join us in celebrating 10 years of serving children and families in our community. Congratulations, Kristen.
Thank you so much to Mayor Anderson and to the commissioners, particularly to Commissioner Hess and Commissioner Pradle, who made all this possible and do extra support for me and for KC Ready Fours. It's really an honor to accept this proclamation and the recognition of KC Ready Fours It's an organization that is a true gem and distinguishing feature for our community. In our 10 years of service, we provided tuition assistance to over 2,100 families in the community, and thousands more children have benefited from our high quality supports. And it's truly an honor to be a part of the organization. So thank you so much for recognizing.
Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. It is great to be in a community where we align with the hopes, desires, and dreams of so many organizations and people who are doing this work here in Kalamazoo. So please communicate to your whole team the deep appreciation of the Kalamazoo City Commission and the fact that we're looking forward to another great 10 years of work together. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
The third proclamation commemorates Mary Brown and her recent passing. There is not a recipient here this evening, as far as I know, for this proclamation. And so I have the honor of reading it. It's a proclamation of the City of Kalamazoo commemorating Mary Brown. Whereas Mary Brown began her legislative career in 1976 as a member of the Michigan House of Representatives and served her constituents tirelessly for 18 years, working to improve the lives of Michiganders. And whereas during her tenure, Mary was known as a trailblazer and a warrior who exercised her legislative skills to advance women's rights and the creation of the school-age parents program, the passage of the Married Women's Property Act, and the development of testimony guidelines for victims of criminal sexual conduct. And whereas Mary Brown sat as the chair of the Constitutional Revision and Women Rights Committee, where she became the first legislator to hold hearings on various key women's issues, such as pay equity and domestic violence. She was also the co-chair of the Michigan Women's Assembly that made recommendations for the public and private sector regarding matters of the economy, healthcare, families, education, international and criminal law. And whereas upon her retirement from the legislature, Mary Brown continued to be a positive influence with her involvement with the Girl Scouts of Glowing Embers Council in Kalamazoo, where she mentored hundreds of girls, keeping with her dedication to empowering women. And whereas Mary Brown dedicated her life to being a positive role model and striving to advance women's rights, she is fondly remembered by her husband, 4 children, many grandchildren, and all those who knew her. Now, therefore, on behalf of the 54th City Commission, I, David F. Anderson, Mayor of the City of Kalamazoo, do hereby urge all Kalamazoo residents to join me in remembering Mary Brown for her outstanding career in the legislature and for the wonderful person she was. Commissioners, you have before you the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any changes anyone would like to see from the commission? We'll see any at this point. Next item is communications. City Manager Ritzma.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I want to announce the budget work session that we have coming up next Monday, the 13th of December from 6 to 9 p.m. And this work session will be held virtually via Zoom. So look forward to that. And secondly, we have this evening a presentation, a long-awaited presentation on the sustainability plan for the City of Kalamazoo. So I will turn it over to our Environmental Services Coordinator, Jamie McCarthy.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you. We're excited to be here this evening to talk about kicking off our sustainability plan. So I'm going to share my screen and get set up here a second. Okay, can you see a full slide there? Okay,
Yes.
excellent.
Yes.
Maybe it needs to be a little smaller. Okay, great. So just to begin, my name is Jamie McCarthy. I'm the Sustainable Development Coordinator in Community Planning and Economic Development. And I'm pleased to have here with me a new coworker, Mr. Bergstrom, and I'm going to let him take a minute to introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nolan Bergstrom. I'm the new community planner, formerly an intern since 2019, and then served as an AmeriCorps member, helping Jamie with NFP phase 2 mostly, and then transitioning to sustainability, and then also going to be working with Christina on transportation projects.
Yeah, we're really excited to have Nolan back here at the city and happy for his full-time role in our department. So today we're here to talk about a draft sustainability plan that's going to be coming out later this month. And we just wanted to give you all some background on the process that we've been going through, definitely talk a bit about what you can expect in this plan, and then talk a bit about the engagement timeline and when you're going to see this back on your agenda for approval. I really wanted to start at the beginning here. And the idea for a community sustainability plan came from the city's strategic vision, and specifically the 6 environmental responsibility goals that you see here in the goal map. And we took all of those focus areas and we combined that with a lot of the climate related actions from Imagine Kalamazoo. And you can see some of those listed here, right? We're talking about how we transition to more renewable energy within our community, how we focus on green buildings and electrifying fleet and vehicles in the city, and the infrastructure that it takes to support that kind of transition. And then I'd also like to mention that this plan is really a response to the Commission's climate emergency resolution that was adopted at the end of 2019. And it comes at a really critical time when we're seeing a lot of federal and state commitments to a zero carbon future. Just as an example, I'll mention that in early 2022, we expect to see the state of Michigan release their climate plan for Michigan. And so this slide here just gives you a little bit of an idea on the process that we went through. So sort of right after the Commission's climate emergency declaration, we started and kicked this off with a community survey. And we formed an ad hoc steering committee of both city staff and community members to help guide us. And they helped us hold several focus groups to, again, gather input and data and direction for a plan of this scope. And then we spent 2021 really in an internal focus, working with our staff in different departments, and we're sort of finalizing that draft and review process at the end of the year here. Okay, so I wanted to talk just a little bit about the scope of a community sustainability plan. You know, what is included in a plan like this? And using the different community feedback and engagement that we did, we formed 4 sustainability themes centered around sort of 4 visions. And the 4 visions include, first, that this is a community-wide plan. So it has a lot of municipal actions, things that we can do at the city, but it extends into our neighborhoods and businesses and will involve a variety of different stakeholders to implement over, you know, decades of time, really focused here on the first 5 years, but knowing that a lot of the technology and the investment that we need is going to come over time. It recognizes how we need to prioritize actions to eliminate fossil fuels from our operations and from our everyday lives, and that we need to become net zero by 2050. I will mention, though, it's not a strict greenhouse gas elimination or mitigation plan, and Nolan will talk a little bit about that in a minute, but it includes other aspects that we heard from the community that are really important around sustainability. It talks about our local food economy, which is really important here in Kalamazoo. It talks about wildlife and waste reduction and recycling, things that aren't always strictly tied to carbon, but in some ways might be. There are also important equity considerations throughout this plan. We want to be sure that we're including everyone in a transition to zero carbon and the economic shifts that we know can come from that change. And then it also has a strong focus on community resilience, things that we can do to adapt and prepare the community, and then also protect our environmental and public health. So I'm just going to highlight some of the big topics here. The plan is long, it covers a lot of different topics, but I think there are some really big ones that we're going to try to highlight at the end of the plan and through our engagement materials that helps folks understand how this might impact them at their home or at their business. And so some of those really big picture, really key components to the plan are certainly buildings and energy efficiency. That's really at the heart of the plan. And it really talks about how we prioritize reducing energy bills and especially focusing on those who in our community have a higher energy burden from the bills that they pay every month. It talks about ways we can accelerate renewable energy at all scales, but it is really in particular focused on or tied to our affordable residential housing efforts. Since we have a lot of those partnerships and that work is taking part now, we're thinking about ways we can make even more efficient homes and tie those to solar panels and give people lower cost in the future, and also environmental benefits to the community. There's a section of the plan dedicated to tree canopy. We also heard about this and addressed this in the master plan, but this really talks about how strategically increasing tree canopy on both public and private lands can help, reduce heat island effects and help mitigate some of that health-related risk having to do with heat and sort of how heat can be disproportionately felt throughout the city, depending on where you live or where your business is located. And then, as I mentioned before, it's talking about strategies we can use to leverage things that are already strong initiatives in our community, like local food economy, ways to reduce waste, partnerships to create more circular economy, recycling, composting, reusing materials that are traditionally thought of as waste. So I'm going to hand it off to Nolan to talk a little bit about how we are proposing to measure progress and some of the greenhouse gas work that we still have to do.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, so one big component of the plan is the greenhouse gas inventory. Initially, the plan was set to feature more climate adaptation and mitigation goals and strategies for us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. But it also evolved into more of the sustainability focuses like Jamie mentioned. But one sort of hurdle was, where do we begin with the greenhouse gas inventory, and does some of the data even currently exist? And so in 2014, the city had completed a municipal operations and buildings inventory, but it wasn't community-wide. So it was really city focused. So this iteration would be more community-wide, regionally focused, and more holistic. And so thus far, some of the limitations have been with data sharing. Also, the format the data comes in is not usually standardized for easy measurement. But one positive out of all this is understanding what we'll need to do to make this an iterative process, and to make sure that we can repeat it and measure it and see progress and benchmark our inventory moving forward. So a lot of this is going to deal with building trust with community partners like Consumers Energy, building trust with educational institutions. We've had a great intern from Virginia Tech who's been compiling the data, helping us understand how to calculate greenhouse gas inventories. And then on our side, really understanding how to build the foundation so that we can, like I said, repeat it and measure it. And also throughout this whole process, understanding that we at the city have certain limitations, and we need to build these partnerships to make sure this plan can be flexible and adaptable as we move forward. So really trying to ground it in our region, and also make sure that we're not isolating any of these three parts.
Thanks, Nolan. Okay, to wrap up here, I just wanted to mention that we have a number of engagement materials we're preparing and want to share with the community. Like I said, later this month and in January, we're going to have a video series, and we really want to be able to highlight some of the key priorities. We're going to see a short list of projects that we're going to be launching into implementation in 2022. So these are projects that, you know, can be accomplished in the next 2 to 5 years. They're going to be a combination of quick win type projects, but also short and midterm projects where we feel like the opportunity is already there or exists to launch into a project. Like I said, I think we have a lot of housing initiatives that we can tie into energy efficiency and solar opportunities. And then we also have a number of processes and policies that we know can be changed, that those changes would help accelerate some community activities. And I think a good example of this is having a streamlined review process for solar installations, for instance. And there are some state and federal standards in that regard that we can work toward to, again, you know, help accelerate and make this more achievable for our community. I'm going to wrap up here, just letting you all know kind of what to expect and where you can find documents to review in the next couple of weeks. So just in terms of engagement, we're wrapping up our review committees. We're setting some of those and prioritizing some of those key projects that we want to launch into right away in 2022. We've started some community engagement, but we're going to do a lot more in terms of our video series and some listening sessions in January. Again, a draft will be out the end of this month. We'll use January to present that information to the Environmental Concerns Committee and get out to the community and gather feedback. And then our plan is to put out any changes, you know, release that final plan at the end of January. And then with the hope of bringing that back to the commission in February so that you guys can, you know, have seen it. We'll be able to give you a good summary on sort of what public feedback we've been getting and put that, you know, on your agenda for approval so that we can launch into our activities in 2022. And so I'm just going to leave it here at the end with some resources where folks can go on the website, imaginekalamazoo.com, to get updates. You can sign up to get the plan emailed directly to you once that releases here in the next couple of weeks. You can leave comments and find out about community engagement and opportunities to come talk to us and give us your feedback in January. And so with that, thank you for your time again, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have now, and always encourage you to reach out to us, especially after the plan is ready to be released and you get a chance to take a look at that.
Thank you, Ms. McCarthy and Mr. Bergstrom. Are there any questions that commissioners have for our team that's leading this evening? Vice Mayor Cooney.
Thanks a lot. You guys have done so much work here. It's really, really impressive. And I know that, you know, we got nothing definitive here. We're working on this whole thing. But I've been reading a lot about this lately, and I'm looking at Germany. And Germany, the Green Party in Germany in the recent election got very much more power than they got. And Germany is looking at the possibility of putting solar panels on every house in Germany. I'm wondering if you're looking at this idea about solar panels, and I'm wondering if the Biden plan, the infrastructure plan that was just passed, is making this any more possible. And I don't know, there's discussion about whether it should be every house or there should be a central location which connects to the houses. I don't know, Jamie, have you guys looked at that at all?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there are a lot of benefits to those different models. And the way the plan is written right now, there's some flexibility to try different models. And so there are certainly some initiatives we can take and need to take to bring solar to individual homes. And we've been talking about, you know, how do we try to tie solar to these all electric homes so that right away we can be getting that carbon benefit, right? We're not relying on the current electric grid that does have, does still have fossil fuel as part of that grid. But we would like to test community solar, in, more of a central location or a larger scale, and then, multiple homes could use that. There are some legislative limitations in our state right now. And so there's some advocacy points in the plan that you're going to see that talk about maybe what we as a community need to express to the state that we want to be able to do as a community. But there are some options we can partner with our current utilities in the state to pilot something on a smaller scale where we would have solar at that kind of scale. And I think that's probably going to be needed. And you're going to see that in the strategy that we're going to need both. And we're really going to have to try to focus on where we can gain space or form partnerships to have those kinds of larger scale models.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Decker.
Hello there, Commissioner Decker. I just wanted to say, Commissioner Cooney, thank you for asking that question, because I actually, marked it off because that was also one of my questions regarding how to make us more solar incorporated, and again, removing those emissions that we have. So yes, thank you for that question or for that recommendation, Commissioner Cooney.
So I don't see any other questions at this time, but it looks like we're going to be deeply involved with this over the next few weeks. Looking forward to the final plan, and really appreciate you keeping us updated on this and your ongoing work. Even though COVID isn't over, it feels like we're just going to dive back in and do the work as best we can, even though it has slowed some things up. So I appreciate that very much. City Manager Ritzma.
That concludes communications.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Next is the opportunity for public comments, and Deputy City Manager Chamberlain, do we have any public comments?
Yes, sir, we do. And we'll go ahead and start playing those for now.
Thank you.
Good evening. This is Dorothy Appleyard calling. I'm a resident of the city of Kalamazoo, and I'm calling tonight to speak to the emergency housing ordinance. Let me begin by saying that I'm grateful that the Commission is addressing the needs of the unsheltered in the city of Kalamazoo. But I'm concerned that until we recognize that homelessness is a symptom of the primary issue of pervasive and systemic poverty, until we understand that the city's role in addressing poverty could or should be, there is not enough data available for us to understand how to address the problem. The emergency ordinance is temporary, designed to address the immediate needs of those who need shelter. But it is worrisome that it is planned to expire in September of 2022, when we will once again be entering the cold weather season. What are expectations? What are our expectations for change? Or will another year pass with no significant change at all? The city cannot provide housing for everyone who needs it indefinitely. We can ensure that the most efficacious use of resources is part of the strategy for improving the lives of all Kalamazoo residents. There is a large sector of the community, namely the working poor, who live very near the edge of homelessness. It takes only an unexpected medical expense, a car breakdown, or the loss of a job to cause financial hardship for families who have worked hard to attain a home and are now struggling to keep it. Homelessness is a symptom of a larger issue of poverty, and we need to address the issue as a community and ensure that equitable distribution of resources. In order to do that successfully, we have to engage each other in meaningful two-way conversation. We need a discussion that enables the community to be heard. While there are disagreements on strategies, it's important that residents have a seat at the table. I hope you will plan to address the bigger issue of homelessness. Thank you for your consideration. Good night.
My name is Raymond again. Good morning, and I am actually a resident of Kalamazoo and a property owner in the Edison neighborhood community. This is in regard to the homeless pods being considered for location in the Edison community. The lack of success in addressing the homeless challenge is in part due to the city's failure to involve one of the most crucial stakeholders in the decision-making process, the residents of Kalamazoo. Prior to the introduction of Pod City, it is crucial to gather information and input from all of the stakeholders, particularly from those that reside in communities being considered as part of, as a location, as a possible site for Pod City. One of the mechanisms for soliciting input from the residents to the council has been through the neighborhood associations. With that said, the Edison Neighborhood Association, in our opinion, has failed to adequately and accurately represent the voices of the residents of the community to city officials, including the city commission. Simply put, many residents do not believe that the Edison Neighborhood Association has the best interests of residents in mind. Considering the fact that the only area mentioned in the media for the location of Pod City has been in the Edison neighborhood, we are proposing that a committee be established that includes residents from the Edison neighborhood community that are not directly associated with the Edison Neighborhood Association. This committee would be involved in all conversations relevant and relative to the establishment of Pod City, including but not limited to the location of Pod City, vetting process, safety and security, development, enforcement of rules and regulations, trespassing, pandering, drug usage while on the premises, and maintenance and upkeep of property, as well as progressive disciplinary procedures for those that violate regulations. Had the city communicated with the residents from the Edison neighborhood, they would have learned that the proposed site located at 322 Stockbridge floods similar to the flood zone at the previous homeless encampment known as Ambercy site. That information alone should remove 322 Stockbridge from consideration. Transparency. Residents that currently live in the area where Pod City is proposed and who will be directly impacted by its presence learned about decisions regarding Pod City well after decisions have been made. Conversations with officials appear to be held in secret and well out of the public's eye. As a result, a level of distrust has surfaced and is creating a counterproductive us against them mentality. Consequently, citizens understandably question the motives and intentions of those involved in the location, planning, and direction of Pod City. Many even speculate if exclusion is intentional. A matter of this significance requires transparency at all levels. If the community is expected to embrace this initiative, then it is crucial that it have involvement on the front end. It is both counterproductive and unfair to suggest that the community will totally embrace decisions without having legitimate input. We look forward to engaging in further conversation with the City Commission as it relates to identifying strategies to combat our homeless challenge. Please feel free to contact me directly through my email, raymondgann@hotmail.com. Again, thanks again. This is Raymond Gann.
Hi, my name is Maddie Jordan Woods. I am a resident of the city of Kalamazoo, and I am calling concerning the homeless emergency ordinance, and I am asking commissioners to review before you vote and allow more resident input, but more important, to understand that this ordinance is allowing for anyone who have vacant lots to be able to put pods. And I don't think it's fair that only the low-income neighborhoods are going to be affected. Most of the affluent neighborhoods in our city, they do not have vacant lots. And I don't understand why the city commission is not stepping back and asking the other jurisdictions to help us with the homeless problem. Kalamazoo cannot do this alone. And to say because all the services are in Kalamazoo, it's still that then some of the services need to be spread out so that everyone is contributing to addressing this issue. Thank you very much. Yes, I believe we have to do something, but I don't think Kalamazoo should be the only one that is doing something. And more important, I don't think that there should be an ordinance that is set up that puts an unnecessary burden on the least likely neighborhoods to be able to do anything about it when there are other issues that come with it. Thank you very much. Bye.
Hello, my name is Rashaan Helso, owner of Above and Beyond Unisex Salon at 305 East Stockbridge. I am directly across from the encampment pods that are going up my main concern is that, one, I was never aware by anyone in the city or any HRI workers that they were going to do that. And a lot of people on my street was not aware of this as well. So I would like a little bit more information. I've been at this business for 16 years. It is a business. I don't know the terms of the pods, but now I have to be on high alert. Could you give me a call back at 269-929-3571? My name is Rashaan Helso. Again, I'm in concerns of the encampment pods that's going directly in front of my business of 16 years. So could you give me a call back? 269-929-3571. And again, this is about not being notified by the city or HRI about this proposal or these pods that's going up.
Hello, my name is Chris Glasser, and I'm with the Kalamazoo Eastside Neighborhood Association. I, of course, support the amendment to the grant that will assist us as we work to revitalize the East Main Corridor, but I'm also calling to voice my support for the emergency housing ordinance. The proposed project is an essential first step in addressing homelessness in the community, especially now as temperatures begin to drop below freezing. I am disappointed by some residents who say, I don't think this neighborhood is right for the project, or not in my backyard. We need this project, and the project needs a home. We need to work together to make sure that no matter where the project is located, it will be successful. If everyone has the mindset of, not in my neighborhood, the project will never happen. That is why I support the ordinance. Thank you.
This is Ray Sweeney speaking. I'm a resident of the city of Kalamazoo. I just want to applaud the city commission for all that you're doing for affordable housing, and in particular, this emergency housing ordinance. Thank you for doing things that are effective in changing the lives of people that are currently living in the rough in all sorts of strange circumstances. I also wanted to applaud HRI for stepping forward with these imaginative, if not expensive, solutions to a tent. And what is being proposed is far-sighted and will really liberate people to get their lives sorted out if they're interested. So thank you. I'm also a member of the Isaac Affordable Housing Task Force, and we are generally applauding all these things that you're doing. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tina McClinton, and I do live in the city of Kalamazoo. Hi, my name is Tina, and I do live in the city of Kalamazoo. I live in Southtown neighborhood on Lake Street, where it floods 2-3 times a year. Where it floods 2 to 3 times a year, where your sewers back up in our homes and in our streets, where your residents already have to deal with a failing infrastructure, failing sewer system. This is a whole neighborhood that floods. Lake, Burdick, John, Stockbridge, Crosstown, Walter, Vine, Jasper, Portage, all floodplain areas, all sewer backup areas, including the DHS building. So the reason I am calling is because I live in Kalamazoo, and we heard over here in Southtown neighborhood, which goes all the way down Stockbridge to Portage Road. The neighborhood that has never been talked to, that has been shoved under the rug, ignored again, that you want to put Pod City there on Stockbridge, old DHS building. But we, again, never heard from the city of Kalamazoo about this. I am not opposed to emergency shelter. But did you not just move them 2 times because they were in a floodplain? This is not a good area for this. This is another bad floodplain area. There are so many other sites that don't flood or have sewer backups. I ask that you postpone this vote until we can get some questions answered. I feel the city staff is being dishonest. Why are you not looking at other sites that are not on floodplains? Question, Will your guests in the sheds be able to consume drugs and alcohol on the site? And what do you have in place to stop it? Will vehicles on site be required to have plates just like everyone else? What about leaking cars and oil for the environment? We already flood. If the encampment causes trouble for the neighbors, who do we send the bill to? What is when they damage stuff? And how are you going to protect our last green space, which is in the NFP, from them cooking meth in the woods right across the street from the pod city and prevent it from catching on fire? And how are you going to protect the woods from their trash and walking in homeowners' backyards all hours of the night, people who have to work? How are you going to protect us that live in your city, real taxpayers? This is a floodplain, not an appropriate site. When will our questions get answered? I ask that you postpone this vote and look at a site that the infrastructure is not failing and flooding your homeowners out with flood water and sewer. Thank you. I hope our questions someday will get answered and we will not get ignored this time. Goodbye.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Faison, and I live in Kalamazoo Township. I work for Isaac, and I am calling because I am in support of the emergency housing ordinance. Right now, this is something that will actually help put a little dent in our homeless situation. There is a lot more work that needs to be done. One of the questions that I do have is whether or not the city is reaching out to surrounding municipalities about adopting emergency ordinance in the areas as far as like Portage Ashimo, Kalamazoo Township, because this is needed not just in the city but also in surrounding municipalities. And I am in support of this, and I hope that you are as well, and you do vote yes, because that is one of the things we need to continue to try to all work together in order to try to do what it is that we can for the betterment of our community. Thank you.
Good evening. This is Toby Hannah Davies. I am co-chair of the Isaac and TRHT Housing Task Force, and I do live in the city. I want to let you know that the Housing Task Force of Isaac and TRHT is in favor of the emergency housing ordinance that you're considering tonight. We are very grateful to you for working out the details to have a strong ordinance in place for allowing and also regulating emergency housing. And we know this isn't nearly the whole answer. It's not the right answer for nearly everyone, but we want to thank you for adding this piece and for all of the rest of the work that you're doing to provide affordable housing in other ways as well, some of them on your agenda tonight. Thank you very much for good, very quick work on the emergency housing ordinance. Thank you.
Hello, yes, my name is McDonald. I'm a city resident. The reason for my call is because I was wondering, it's my understanding residents in the Edison neighborhood didn't really have a comment or wasn't allowed the affordability of any say-so of pods going up on Stockbridge, where the former DHS office used to be. I live in this community, and with us doing so many projects of the upcoming farmers market and Marketplace Boulevard area, I just don't see that location on Stockbridge being a viable spot for those pods nonetheless. I understand that homelessness is real. I just don't know if this is the best location for those pods. And if the city does vote to go forward, what would the oversight be, and how would that information be put out to the public in regards to that oversight? And if this is a temporary thing, as it says it is, what are the future developments for that area? Thank you, and hope to hear hear from you guys.
Commissioners, my name is Richard Stewart. I'm a resident of the city in the Southtown neighborhood. Let's not kid ourselves. The ordinance tonight for the emergency housing is being pushed through on the fast track just to avoid input by the neighboring property owners and residents of the Stockbridge site. The city has admitted that this is the only site within the city that is considered for the HRI Shed City Concentration Camp project. HRI has apparently already ordered containment-style sheds prematurely without a site vetted or ready to dump these sheds upon delivery. The premature action apparently is being used to pressure you to make a fast decision today that will subvert zoning variance requirements for such a special use. The normal zoning variance process is what would otherwise be needed to obtain the false premise of to use a variance that would require notice in writing being given to all property owners within a certain distance, and then a public meeting after they received written notice. The ordinance under the false premise of community engagement is an attempt to eliminate the need to notice be given to property owners surrounding the site of any possible negative influences, whether it be traffic for the new use, noise, pollution, garbage, etc. By minimizing the surrounding property owners of any zoning variance, it's predatory when all you want to do is not have to notify the surrounding property owners in writing before the use. The Zoning Board of Appeals hears neighborhood concerns and addresses whether to approve the variance or not. If you approve this ordinance tonight, you are eliminating the requirement to notify the neighbors in writing. This would be a matter directed to the neighbors and not the community. HRI has already ordered its sheds. It is only a matter of where the sheds will sit. HRI claims that an alternative sites are being considered, not just Stockbridge. Since the city has admitted that this is the only site within the city they're considering, we must assume that the considering HRI sites are outside the city in the county. And this would be then a countywide solution as it's been presented. I have suggested alternative sites like Mayor's Park or the Stockbridge site is known to flood, and I've provided photos. I ask that you consider postponing this vote until the Southtown neighborhood property owners can be written in writing. Thank you.
My name is Jeff Wiseman. I am a resident of the city, and I have two concerns. One is the lack of parking enforcement and code enforcement on the north side. There are a number of cars parked on the street that I have reported. These cars have been parked there for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and no license plates. Some are flat tires, and I report them, and nothing seems to happen about them. Just in general, there is a true lack of enforcement for parking on the north side for overnight parking, and I sure would like to see that be addressed. Secondly, the lights at the train station or metro station around the perimeter, particularly on the corner of Kalamazoo and Burdick, are out, and it is very dark over there. And I have reported it, and I am getting no satisfaction for the darkness. I think the city has a real problem with lights being out. Individuals cannot be expected to phone in a number of lights, especially since we don't know who we're supposed to phone them into, whether they're the cities or whether they're Consumers Energy or whether they're the property owners. I have been on the city about lack of lighting in many areas for probably 10 years now, and they still don't seem to have a solution to the problem. That's it. Thank you. Bye.
Good evening. I am Pat Benji, a resident of the city of Kalamazoo. I'm also a deacon at St. Martin's Episcopal Church and a member of Isaac's Affordable Housing Task Force. I'm speaking in support of the Commission adopting the Emergency Housing Ordinance. It is well thought out, addressing access to social services on site, the personal needs of residents, and their security. It will provide warm, dry, and safe homes for those who might otherwise be out in the elements with no secure place to sleep and leave their belongings. I hope that this will be approved this evening so the work of locating and approving sites and agencies can proceed quickly. We are already into cold weather, and the sooner people can get into this emergency housing, the better. This is only one step in the process of addressing emergency and long-term housing needs in our community. I am hopeful and grateful to all those who are looking toward innovative solutions to this immediate problem. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. I have a couple of things that I want to address. On September 22nd, 1997, the then city attorney, Cinnabro, stated that the revised ordinance dealt with inconsistencies with the definitional provisions of animals running at large. And there were a number of situations where owners had their dogs under control, even though the dog was not actually on a leash. The concerns were addressed by adding 719B. The changes made it unlawful for any owner of a dog to permit a dog to be off the owner's premises unless the dog was held securely on a leash. However, the requirement would not apply to working dogs and animals and would not apply to dogs under the immediate control of the owner. The presumption was added that if a dog bit or attacked somebody, it would be presumed the dog was not under the control of the owner. If the city ran into enforcement issues with this language, the city attorney said he would report back to the city commission. As of right now, I'm being informed that a dog has to be on a leash at all times, no matter what, if it's off the property of its owner. And we all know that doesn't happen when people play fetch with their dogs at parks. And I'm just wondering why the city is pursuing criminal charges for people playing fetch with their dog at city parks, when the ordinance clearly states that they don't have to as long as they're under control. And the second thing that I wanted to address was that I was informed last week that only licensed media was allowed at press conferences at KDPS. I was wondering if Clyde Robinson would mind talking a little bit about licensed media or legitimate media and how that works. I'm not really sure. I've never heard of someone being licensed to be media. So, yeah, thank you very much. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. And thanks for all the work you do.
Hi, my name is Michelle Davis, Executive Director of Housing Resources Incorporated. I'm calling today to thank the city for the emergency housing ordinance that will be discussed this evening, and to thank you and pledge our support for that ordinance that allows not only HRI but other entities to produce solutions for people that are staying outdoors and experiencing homelessness who are unsheltered. We appreciate your creativity and your optimism in finding solutions. I also want to thank the commissioners who received the emails and phone calls from me with information specifically about the Kalamazoo Pod Community, a Place of Dignity project that Housing Resources is working on, that we hope will fit into the ordinance if it's passed. I'd like to direct you all to HRI's website, www.housingresourcesinc.org, where a list of frequently asked questions can be found. That has also been sent to all of the commissioners before. And we have been in contact with the Edison Association since October 28th about a potential site. I want to reiterate that a site for our specific project has not been finalized, and we are continuing to do our due diligence, which is why we are waiting for a finalization of the site to have full community involvement in those discussions. But you can find all of the up-to-date information on the frequently asked questions that are on our website. Thank you again for your support to the community and our unsheltered people with this ordinance, and we look forward to further discussion at the city level. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, this is Deputy City Manager Jeff Chamberlain. That was the last public comment tonight.
Thank you very much, Deputy City Manager Chamberlain. First of all, I want to thank everyone who took the time and made the effort to call in and provide public comments this evening. I appreciate that very much. I know the whole commission does. Secondly, even though we won't respond immediately to all those comments, I do want to remind everybody that the item that was the majority of the discussion was related to is on our regular agenda this evening. It's item H1. And I know that there will certainly be discussion during the time when that ordinance comes up. So this won't be the last time you will hear about that topic this evening. Next item on our agenda is our consent agenda. City Manager Ritzma.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 18 items on the consent agenda this evening. The first 16 will be requested for approval, and items 17 and 18 will be held over until December 20, 2021. First item is approval of a one-year contract with Alexander Chemical Corporation for the purchase of 12.5% sodium hypochlorite by volume in the amount of $162,662.50. Next is the approval of a supplemental change order to the code enforcement cleanup contract with Student Haulers for ongoing trash cleanup activities in the amount of $160,000, bringing the total contract amount to $280,000. Next is the approval of a professional service agreement with Hurley and Stewart LLC for construction engineering services for the Parkview Avenue, Oakland to Tamsin water main replacement and street improvements project in the amount of $262,000. Next is the first reading of an ordinance to rezone 111, 117, and 129 Denner Street, 1405 Alamo Avenue from residential single dwelling district to residential duplex district and schedule a public hearing for December 20, 2021. Next is the first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 2, Article 5 of the Kalamazoo City Code regarding the duties of the Historic Preservation Commission. Next is the adoption of a resolution granting a payment in lieu of taxes to Trinity Village Nonprofit Housing Corporation for the housing development located at 701 North Pitcher Street, now known as Ashley Square Townhomes, pursuant to Section 35-4 of the Kalamazoo City Code. Next is the approval of the amended grant agreement with the Kalamazoo Eastside Neighborhood Association for $275,000 to be used to purchase and rehabilitate a previously vacant and blighted property that will further the goals of the neighborhood listed in the Imagine East Side Neighborhood Plan. Next is the approval of an agreement for access to Verberg Park by the United States Environmental Protection Agency and Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy to conduct and monitor remedial activities on the Kalamazoo River from March 1, 2022 to May 31st, 2023. Next is the approval of an amendment to the 2003 Home Investment Partnership Program, subrecipient subrecipient grant agreement for Trinity Village Nonprofit Housing Corporation. Next is the acceptance of a wellhead protection grant in the amount of $70,000 from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. Next is the acceptance of a grant from the Irving S. Gilmore Foundation in the amount of $1 million to support the second phase of the Kalamazoo Farmers Market redevelopment. Next is the authorization for the city managers to sign a consent of easement holders form as part of a private restrictive covenant for 4717 West KL Avenue, a property associated with the release of petroleum from a former mobile gasoline station. Next is the approval and purchase of 830, 826, and 822 and 812 North Rose pending title work, and 110 West Frank, 801 North Burdick, 809 North Burdick, 819 North Burdick, 901 North Burdick, and 903 North Burdick, and 907 North Burdick streets for the creation of housing as it relates to the homeownership new construction infill strategy for a sales price not to exceed $164,500. Next, the approval of the purchase of 912 North Rose, 908 North Rose, 122 Darden Court, 119 Darden Court, 818 North Rose, 814 North Rose, 811 North Burdick streets to be utilized for the creation of housing as it relates to the homeownership new construction infill strategy for the sales price not to exceed $5,000. And then the approval of the mayor's appointments and reappointments to the following boards and commissions. The reappointment of Jeff Brenneman to the Downtown Development Authority Board for a term expiring on March 31, 2022. The reappointment of Carl Brown to the Downtown Economic Growth Authority Board for a term expiring on March 31, 2022. The reappointment of Brant Fletcher to the Downtown Economic Growth Authority and Downtown Development Authority Boards for a term expiring on March 31, 2024. Next is the reappointment of Stephanie Hinman to the Downtown Economic Growth Authority and Downtown Development Authority Boards for a term expiring on March 31, 2025. Next is the reappointment of Susan Lindeman to the Downtown Economic Growth Authority and Downtown Development Authority Boards for a term expiring on March 31, 2025. Next is the reappointment of Patty Owens to the Downtown Economic Growth Authority and Downtown Development Authority Boards for a term expiring on March 31, 2024. Next is the appointment of Laura Worland to the Downtown Economic Growth Authority and Downtown Development Authority for a term expiring on March 31, 2024. Next is the appointment of Nick Boyd to the Local Officers Compensation Commission for a term expiring on March 31, 2028. Next is the reappointment of Creed Stegall to the Local Officers Compensation Commission for a term expiring on March 31, 2028. Next is the reappointment of Shirley Weathers to the Local Officers Compensation Commission for a term expiring on March 31, 2027. Next is the reappointment of Robert Glasser to the Natural Features Protection Review Board for a term expiring on March 31, 2024. Next is the reappointment of Paul McNeilis to the Natural Features Protection Review Board for a term expiring on March 31, 2024. Next is the approval of the minutes from the City Commission meetings on November 15, 2021. Next is the approval of a purchase agreement for the sale of 440 South Burdick Street to Burdick at Cedar LLC for the sales price of $100,000. And finally, approval of a purchase agreement for the sale of 478 Reed Street to John and Brooke Green for $250.
Thank you for reading that long list, City Manager Ritzma. So commissioners, the requested action is a motion to approve items 1 through 16, postpone items 17 and 18 until December 20th, and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Vice Mayor Cooney. Is there a second?
Support. Commissioner Hess.
Support from Commissioner Hess. Clerk Borland, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Hess,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Juarez,
Yes.
Commissioner Pradle,
Yes, but I'll abstain on item G5.
Vice Mayor Cooney,
Yes.
Mayor Anderson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Decker.
Yes, and I will be abstaining from item G7, G13, and G14 as they relate to the Kalamazoo Land Bank, and I'm on the board. And also for the G7, that has to deal with the Kalamazoo East Side Neighborhood Association, which I am working with also.
That is it, Mayor.
Thank you, commissioners. The motion passes. Next is our regular agenda. And the first item is item H1, City Manager Ritzma.
Adoption of an ordinance to amend Chapter 9, Building and Building Regulations to add Article 8, Emergency Housing, an emergency measure to allow for temporary housing facilities in Kalamazoo.
Thank you, Manager Ritzma. Is there a staff report on this item?
Yes, I will turn over the reins to Christina Anderson, our city planner, who will provide background on this.
Thank you, City Manager Ritzma, Mayor Anderson, Vice Chair Cooney, and all the other commissioners. With me tonight is Director of Community Planning and Economic Development, Rebecca Kick, and together we're going to give the presentation on this ordinance and answer any of your questions as you consider it. So if you give me a moment to share my screen, I will do so and we will get started. Can everybody see the presentation slides?
Yep. Yes.
Yes.
Great. Rebecca, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Thanks, Christina. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. I'm Rebecca Kick, Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. And tonight, Christina and I are going to present to you the Emergency Housing Ordinance. Go to the next slide. Many requests that we have been getting over the past years are from housing and service providers, typically go around and around in a combination of discussions about zoning and building codes. And many of those end up being where the city is kind of hemming and hawing because we're almost there. We're almost allowing different types of housing, tiny houses, accessory dwelling units, things like this. We're loosening up our zoning ordinance where we can have multiple buildings on a site, but we're not quite there yet. And this emergency housing ordinance is yet another step that the city is taking to recognize that homelessness is an ongoing problem in Kalamazoo, and that we understand that we need more creative solutions to help people in where they are at. And it's also part of this ordinance is about providing necessary housing solutions with safety and services in place. In Imagine Kalamazoo, we saw the need to create and preserve housing across a broad group of types and income throughout every single neighborhood in the city. We know that these new solutions to provide additional types of housing that meet people where they are difficult for us to think about integrating into our cities because we have such a rigid notion of what zoning categories are and what they aren't. But that's not where people live. People don't live in zoning categories. And it's through our work with our housing providers and helping people who are experiencing homelessness and all the way to those folks who want to become homeowners and thinking about that entire continuum that keeps us up at night and keeps us being creative with housing solutions like this. And we understand that as we continue to have capacity in our local shelters that we support in our community, we do recognize that more options are needed. And that includes individuals to families as well. And so as we were looking through what kinds of solutions we could come up with, if you can put up the next slide, Christina, we started to reach out to a lot of different resources that we had either heard of from our housing providers, from just residents that were emailing us. We consulted cities. Yakima, Washington has had an ordinance that we mirrored very closely with our own. In Denver, Colorado, we're using different housing types again. Eugene, Oregon has been running with their ordinance since 2013, and were able to provide us with infinite wisdom about the actual enforcement, the actual implementation of what that ordinance looks like over several years and what they felt their lessons learned were, as well as Austin, Texas, which has a permanent housing model. So by bringing all of these groups together, including multiple city departments that were involved in the process, we were able to gain, a good general understanding and information to be able to put together what we feel is our recommendation for an emergency housing ordinance. And now I will ask City Planner Christina Anderson to walk through that housing ordinance so that we can hopefully answer a lot of questions that we heard on the phone calls tonight, as well as many that might be coming up in your heads right now.
Thank you, Director Kick. Again, this is Christina Anderson. I am the city planner for Kalamazoo, and I'm going to walk you through the pieces of the ordinance and how they'll operate this evening. So at the most basic level, what does this ordinance do and what does it not do, I think is what we need to talk about first, and how it gets implemented. So the goal is to be able to provide emergency housing for temporary housing in Kalamazoo. And in order to do that, we need to allow it. And that's what this ordinance does tonight. It allows the development of temporary emergency housing, and it outlines the standards or parameters that are required for this type of housing's development. This ordinance does not select locations where the housing may occur. It outlines how it occurs. So it kind of sets the bumpers around the allowance of this type of housing. I like to think of it as, the ordinance, step one, allows the type of housing, it opens the door. And that's got to be the first step, because it's hard to discuss anything else when it's not permitted and we don't have the right set of standards surrounding it. Because that's step two to achieve the emergency housing that we're seeking. And that is, implementation of this ordinance. And it really relies on our housing partners and providers to do the following things once we've opened the door. We need them to walk through that door, right, and propose a location, apply for permits and approval and go through the process, physically develop the housing units and manage the housing facility. And we talk about that in detail a little bit later in this presentation through the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, that's required. So what are the pieces in the ordinance that help us achieve allowing this housing type? There are three main elements, and all of these must be met prior to any housing opening being created on a site. So the first part is a permit and review process, and the ordinance outlines that, and I'll go into detail in just a minute on what that looks like. The second is the Memorandum of Understanding. And this is, because it's kind of the people-focused part of this, right? This is, how the housing will be managed and operated, and the services that will be provided. And it's an agreement between the city, the property owner, and the housing party. And then finally, those bumpers, those standards that are required for the development of this type of housing. There we go. So permit and process, we'll talk about that first. So we have had up online for the last couple of weeks a draft application for the public to review, as well as everyone on this commission. It outlines three basic requirements, right? There's the facility plan, which is akin or like a site plan. The requirement for the memorandum of understanding, which again outlines those human-centric elements of this type of housing, and then the requirement for a public meeting. Applications do not have a fee. We will plan to review the applications at our projects meetings. These are already scheduled meetings that happen every Wednesday morning that have a similar staffing level to our site plan review meetings. So this includes planning, building trades, public services, and Department of Public Safety, specifically the fire marshal, who is involved in all of our reviews. So we talked about the facility plan as a critical part of the permit process. That's like a site plan. It details the development and the standards. Again, these are things that are site specific. The layout, driveways and access, setbacks, housing floor plans for our building trades to review, emergency service plan, how will emergency access be provided? What does that look like? And all the other details in between. This facility plan really lays out those site development standards, like setbacks from property lines, like the requirement that this type of temporary housing must be placed on an improved surface, and other details. And so this is where the housing provider would lay them out for city staff to review. During the permit review process, a public meeting must be held by the housing provider. Once they have this, they're proposing a site, they have a outline of their memorandum of understanding, which I'll talk about in just a minute, what that means. But all those details about how the site will be managed, they have their plan, so we have an idea on how it looks. They'll take all that information and we'll host a public informational meeting, again, during the permit application review period. This meeting must be advertised at least 1 week in advance, according to the draft ordinance you have before you tonight, including direct notices to the neighborhood association and property owners and occupants within 300 feet of the proposed facility. This number, 300 feet, is not random. It mirrors what we require when we do a notice for either the Plan Commission or the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so we kind of followed that number with this direct notice as well. And then any materials that are provided through that outreach need to be provided to the city, again, as part of that package for the application review before any decisions are made. So I keep saying I'm going to talk about the memorandum of understanding. Here is some information on that. So we have, again, facility plan, which is site specific. We have our open or public informational meeting, and we have the memorandum of understanding, which is the third requirement when a housing provider is making an application to the city. Again, the memorandum of understanding, or MOU, is something that is discussed and finalized between the housing provider and the city, very specifically the city attorney's office, as well as other staff. And it's agreement between all the parties involved, housing provider, city, and property owner. So what does the memorandum of understanding do? One of the first things that it does, most critically, is determine the number of occupants that can be permitted on a site at one time. And the city will determine that through the memorandum of understanding by looking at things like facility location and layout. What is the staffing plan? And what is the capacity of the service provider to manage that site? The memorandum of understanding will also detail, the complete management, operations, and community living guidelines for the site. And this can include things, this will include things like the length of stay, if there's a minimum or maximum, any details about termination, warning or infraction policies for those that are staying in the housing, the alcohol and drug use policy, visitor policy, quiet hours, bicycle and vehicle allowances, pet policy, are pets allowed? If so, how many? Is there a veterinary check required? All of those type of details would be in the memorandum of understanding. couple of other critical items in the memorandum of understanding. The service provider will not refuse a resident in this temporary emergency housing because of factors like age, sex, marital status, sexual orientation, race, creed, color, gender identity, national origin, veteran or military status, or the presence of any sensory, mental, or physical disability, or use of a service animal by a person with a disability. A acknowledgement of our code of ordinances, specifically our non-discrimination section in chapter 18, an understanding that site inspections will occur from time to time to make sure that the project is staying within the parameters of the ordinance as well as the memorandum of understanding. And finally, and importantly, because this came up in our calls, is the acknowledgement of the sunset date. This is an emergency ordinance. It is intended to be temporary. We have gone through a variety of date options, trying to understand what will serve the community best. And the original draft online referred to a date of September of next year. And I think our first caller noted how quickly that will come. And, you know, what does that mean? What expectations are we setting? And internally in staff and having conversations with some of those great municipalities around the country that have been doing this work for many years, realized that the date, that original date was not going to get us what we were hoping to achieve with this ordinance. You know, this is temporary. It's like a pilot program, and we need time to understand how this type of housing works, how we can make adjustments, and the like. This is a goal to learn from this. The goal of this is to provide housing now and learn from it so we can make a more permanent strategy moving forward. And we need the time to do that. And so the sunset date for this ordinance will be December 1, 2023, as it is written before you this evening. And so the memorandum of understanding is an acknowledgement of all of these things, but including that, because if it indeed when it sunsets and the site needs to become something permanent, housing, or the housing, another permanent site elsewhere is available, then we're going to need to figure out, you know, through this memorandum of understanding, how the site will be cleared. What does that look like? What is the timeline for that? So all of those details go into the memorandum itself. So what are some of the next step and timeline details? So as you recall, Director Kick a couple weeks ago, November 15th, presented to the Committee of the Whole the initial information about this emergency ordinance. Staff has been working very quickly to get this up and available for public review for our housing providers, for our neighborhood contacts to review, and for the public, understanding that, you know, the later we get in the year, the colder it gets and the need rises exponentially. We did send out direct communication to our housing providers, neighborhood contacts, and just general community partners on the availability of information from this ordinance, opportunity for staff to answer questions. And that brings us to tonight, where we are reviewing this draft ordinance, and we'll be having a discussion, and we've already taken public comment on this topic. And, you know, Rebecca and I wanted to make sure that we include, again, because the goal of, you know, while this, assuming this this ordinance is approved tonight, you know, that doesn't kind of stop staff's work, right? You know, in addition to reviewing any projects that come before us through this draft ordinance, you know, the clock has started for us to come up with a permanent strategy to make sure that we are providing housing for our entire community. And so our goal is to get started pretty quickly with that work. And so with that, a very quick introduction, Rebecca and I are available for your questions. I'll stop sharing here. There you go.
Thank you very much, Director Kick and Planner Anderson. So now is the time for questions for members of our city team here. Questions from Commission. Commissioner Pradel.
Sure. Thank you both for the presentation tonight, and from last meeting as well on the 15th last month. This is Commissioner Pradel. So I really appreciate these proactive solutions. And, I kind of think to myself, where would be, a month from now if we're in the polar vortex situation and, we find individuals who are, houseless in crisis. And I find peace in knowing that this is a thoughtful process going forward, proactively. So thank you for that. I just wanted to, again, just ask some questions, just kind of emphasizing things so the public hears this as well. I read a quote on the HRI's website and on their frequently asked questions section that says, quote, is to provide safe transition space for unhoused adults while they seek permanent housing. And even in your presentation, you included permits temporary emergency housing. And so, I just wanted to hear you kind of explain or elaborate a little bit more on the fact that this is indeed, meant to get individuals to a permanent solution in housing. And that's the goal.
Yes, Commissioner Pradel, that this is Christina Anderson, City Planner. That is correct. What is before you for review tonight, what it allows is short-term, for the next 2 years, opportunity for housing for unhoused individuals in Kalamazoo that is run and managed by our local service providers. While we as city staff working with the community and this body work on a more permanent strategy for looking at lots of different housing types, lots of different options, for that longer term strategy for housing in Kalamazoo.
Thank you. And City Planner Anderson, you more than anybody, I think, in terms of the city in your shop, do an amazing job in terms of like community outreach, neighborhood outreach. And I know I've complimented you a number of times that I think you're like a blueprint plan for like the rest of the city in terms of how that happens. I wonder if there would be opportunities as we're working with the housing service providers to maybe help coach and provide them with some tools, best practices and what you've done to work with people. Because, one of the things that I think maybe a number of us have heard over the last few weeks from people is just concern about the fact that this is an emergency ordinance, meaning that time is of the essence, right? What we normally like to do isn't really feasible because time's a ticking, and we're already 1 week into December, and this week we're going to have lows down into the teens. So I just wanted to get your thoughts about that and the feasibility of that support as well.
Sure. So planning staff, other community planning and economic development staff are always happy to help our partners in doing outreach. We follow our public participation plan and can use the guidance in that plan to help do that outreach. The ordinance lays out the minimum, a minimum that kind of mirrors what is done for zoning, rezoning requests in front of the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals. But we regularly, and our applicants regularly go beyond those minimums. And yeah, we are there to help them with that outreach.
Thank you. And just the last question here, Mayor, if I may. So I just wanted to confirm as well. So before anything actually would be approved, ultimately that permit comes to the City Commission for final approval. Is that the case or no? Okay.
No, that is not the case.
Okay.
What you have before you this evening outlines all of the standards and the requirements for any site that comes before the city. Right. So if you are comfortable with the standards and the requirements, that's what you approve this evening. When a individual housing provider comes to us with their proposed site or sites that they're trying to explore, city staff will use what is in the ordinance, as our guide to review those documents. We have a team of reviewers from multiple city departments. So we are covering health, life, safety, issues, fire marshal, building code, public services will be involved if there are any utilities required. So the review happens at that staff level. We have it set up to happen during our projects meetings, which are already scheduled meetings. Again, this is an emergency ordinance, and the goal is to be as expeditious as possible in the review. That doesn't mean not thorough. But it does, we tried to set it up within a process that already exists. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of the review and staff who will be doing the review. These are our great staff that participate in all of our site plan meetings and so forth. And so they're used to seeing permanent projects. This is just, a temporary version of that.
And the permanent ordinance review and input would occur basically like second quarter-ish next year?
Yeah, I think that we will start to kick off those conversations late winter and really get going in spring and summer, which aligns with, my goal of, really looking at our residential zoning districts as well, and the work that we need to do to update our zoning code as part of this permanent housing strategy. Certainly not, zoning is never the only strategy. It's just part of the puzzle. So I imagine that those conversations will also dovetail with that work, and that I'm hoping to start this spring.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Praedel. Commissioner Hess.
Two things. We heard from Maddie Jordan Woods about reaching out to other jurisdictional folks to include them as well and see if they might adopt such an ordinance, and instead of having to focus everything right in the city. Is anything like that being done? Are we speaking to any other townships or any other places within Kalamazoo County about this?
Sure, I'm going to let Director Kick answer this one, because my focus has really been the creation of the ordinance for us. That's kind of where my expertise lie.
Hi, this is Director Kick. So Commissioner Hess, of course, we are always willing to share our time and our capacity to assist with others, very similar to what, efforts that we have done with the Fair Housing Ordinance as well, in helping to show other surrounding municipalities, what we've done and how we got it done. But that's as far as we can go. But yes,
So
they're certainly aware.
there's no recruiting or anything, but it certainly
Please,
is.
if you know, help. Yeah, it's always good to have that. But yes, I mean, we're certainly having the conversations, but.
Thank you. And one more, because Director Baker did do such a lovely job at the Committee of the Whole talking about water, and because water is now a piece of this conversation about it covering a potential site, not a confirmed site at all. But I wonder if he might be able to speak to what some are calling a flood zone, and how that might affect its approval for any housing provider that might want to have that as a site.
Christina, would you like to talk about our semi-permit review process and how that would be run through our staff?
Sure, and I see that Director Baker is also available, so I'll start and then I'll let everyone else chime in. So any site that comes to us, through this process for proposal, those factors are taken into consideration as part of the review process, just like they are when we do a permanent project. And so if a site comes before us, that includes part of a floodplain or any such details, that is all something that staff takes into account. Director Baker has some pretty fantastic staff that works with us regularly through site plan review to consider water and stormwater issues. So all of that will be, reviewed during our project review.
Commissioner Decker, and then Commissioner Juarez.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson. Director Kick, I just had a real quick question, or Ms. Anderson also. So this will expire possibly December 1st of 2023. When someone comes on and applies, are they locked into it for that 2-year time frame? Or, are they able to back out at any time? I don't want, someone to come and say, hey, I want to do this. And then a year into the project, they're saying, oh, I want to pull out. So how do you regulate that? Is it required that they stay in it for the full duration, or is there a time limit?
No, I don't believe we envisioned that anything would have to, is if you're in, or even if you left and can't come back in or anything like that. I think that's really needs to be worked out in the memorandum of understanding. And it would really depend on the property owner, what they're doing. I think that gets to really that memorandum of understanding and what that service provider is bringing. You know, again, I would hope that their first thought in mind was not to leave anybody hanging. I'm being super slang there, but you know, not to leave it, you know, and just kind of pick up sticks and be like, hey, everybody's got to go, and you know, would be able to you know, give someone some stability. I mean, that's certainly what we're trying to do, is you know, vet a project that's going to be stable and is going to allow people to transition, you know, to that next step, whatever that might, or that permanent housing that we're all looking for. So that's why I'd hope they need to close their doors, is because, oh, you know what, the 6 people that were here, we found them all permanent housing. So we're gonna take these down now.
Okay.
That would be my hope.
Thank you for that. And then also, just when it goes to the police presence, will that also be in the MOU of, so are they required to get their own security for the area? Is that what I read in here? Or how will that be policed? How will it be kept safe for, you know, the possible residents that may be in that area and the people that are utilizing the pods, you know, to keep businesses safe and to keep those individuals safe there?
Sure, Commissioner Decker, this is Christina Anderson again. Yes, as part of their plan submittal to the city for reviewing, the housing provider needs to provide information on staffing levels and security. Is it, you know, people staffing 24 hours, you know, is it going to be, you know, quiet hours with gated access, visitor hours during certain periods of time? I think each site will lend something a little bit different, and each housing provider will be comfortable with a different type of project. But those details, those management requirements are, you know, for the service provider to organize and run and provide us with. In terms of, you know, providing emergency access and those type of details. That's why we have the fire marshal on board for our reviews, to make sure that however a site is laid out, that we can access it, which is like kind of mundane, minor details, like making sure units are addressed. You know, each one has a number, having a map, you know, at the entrance of the site, making sure that the pathways around the site, the circulation, that are wide enough for emergency vehicles, you know, if an ambulance were required, and those type of details.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you guys for all your work. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Hi, Commissioner Esteban Juarez here. So one of the things that I see that might be a concern for the city or for the residents or even the pods is how many pods are allowed on one site. If we're allowing the memorandum of understanding to allow somebody to put 50 pods on one site, that's a disaster. And I hope we can take into consideration the fact that a smaller group of number of individuals on a site is much manageable, especially when it comes to having 24-hour staffing. And so I hope you guys really take that into consideration. The second thing I had was just a time issue. Did we create this ordinance first as a city, or did HRI buy pods first and then we created this ordinance?
So, hi, this is Director Kick. Here's how the ordinance has been talked about, in an idea, whether it was Conestoga huts, tiny houses on wheels, or pods, have been talked about for at least 3 years. We were approached last year during the polar vortex with the Conestoga huts. And again, the conversations kept getting caught in the cycle of what zoning, what building code, what zoning, what building code, how close are they together? Can you hook them up with electricity? All of these different things. This has been on our mind for a long time. And we did not, this is coming so much later than we wanted it to, just for a whole host of reasons. But we really wanted to beat the weather this year. We tried to start this ordinance long before the weather got here. We were thinking about this in the summer. We were approached with by HRI when the internet, I'm going to say it wrong. I know it's the ICMA conference, the International City Managers Conference, was in Portland, Oregon this year. That's where the pods were discovered. All of that was happening stage left when we were working on the ordinance for over a year. And it all came together. So there are really great things about that. And there are things that feel weird about that, right? That are getting kind of exploited in a really strange way. So I just want to be clear that, you know, city staff has been trying to come up with solutions, and this was our fastest solution that we could come up with for the emergency housing ordinance for what we saw as a problem last year. But again, pods were not on our minds. We were thinking tiny houses on wheels, Conestoga huts. There are so many other things that people have brought forward to us as solutions. And this hopefully helps all of those people and all of those sites. This is not about one housing provider and one housing model. This is about multiple sites. It takes a village. We all got to throw our hat in this all over the city and figure it out. And that's why this is not a zoning ordinance, and it's not relegated to one type of lot in one type of neighborhood. This is about being creative on the site you have with the product you've got and the team that you can pull together.
And I appreciate that. I totally appreciate that. I think one of the disheartening things for me is that as we look at this situation and we see how years back when we used the Douglas and other churches for warming locations when the polar vortex hit in, I think it was like 2017 or 18, that we organized around, we know that this is an issue that's ongoing. This is not nothing new. This is information we have already. And for me, it's hard for me to sit here and think about it that you guys have been talking about an ordinance for 3 years, for 3 years. And these actions are being taken in a way where it's now, and so for me, I appreciate the hard work. I do, no doubt about it. And I know sometimes when you're working with people who have different opinions and different understandings, and then it becomes their way or our way, it becomes who's right instead of what's right. It's very concerning, especially to the public who are looking to us as leaders. And Christina, you did a great job on that ordinance. And all the information in that ordinance is information based off of what not to do, what we've learned not to do. And collecting that information and putting it in that ordinance is, it looks very, very good work. But my heart is discontent right now because, again, we're faced with a situation that we have before us that could have an easy answer and that's transparent and that's suitable for our community. Though I appreciate the hard work, I seriously do. I just think we need people around the table who can have these conversations and speak to these things in ways where we can get things done a lot faster than they are. And so I'll just leave it there. Thank you guys for your hard work.
Thanks, Commissioner Juarez.
I think he had another question about how many could be on the site.
Thank you, Commissioner Hess. So this is Christina Anderson, city planner again. So we had conversations. We spent a lot of time thinking about, how we handle number of units. And through our conversations with communities that have done this in the past, what we learned from them was to boil down to, what were the things that they considered? The capacity of the service provider to manage a site, the size of the site, the location of the site, the housing type, is it, singles or double occupancy, families, those type of details, what services are provided. And through their learned experience over the last almost 10 years for one community, they had a number, they kept adjusting the number. They tried, they said, we'll do it this way for 6 months. If it works, we could increase it. Or, they just kept updating their temporary ordinance until it became permanent. And so we took from all of that and boiled down, again, what were those key factors that the city used when having conversations with the service providers, the housing providers, to kind of come up with that number. And that's why we have the phrase the way we do in the memorandum of understanding, that the ultimate number that can be housed on a site is based on those factors. And that's worked out using all those unique elements of that site and that housing provider's capacity. We didn't want to, we were, again, this ordinance, going on what Director Kick said, it's not about one district, it's not about one neighborhood or, one location. We're trying to make sure that this is something that we can look at in a variety of locations and make sure that we're setting it up with the right bumpers or parameters so it can happen in a lot of locations, but still happen thoughtfully, safely. Our goal is the same as HRI or any other housing provider's goal, right? We want these to be successful during their duration. And so that is how we came up with that number, again, based on conversations that we had with other cities and both local and other cities' housing providers and their experiences.
Could I make a recommendation that it just be a flat line number for each site? So that way you don't run into, because there could be a property that can hold 50, but doesn't mean there should be 50 there. I mean, manageable 20, 25 units at each property should probably be distinct, stipulation in the memorandum. I mean, it just makes sense because as we see the things that took place in Tent City over on the east side, it was super unmanageable, even with the police department, the constant calls that they kept getting in. And I'm not saying that stuff's going to happen, but what I am saying, if we're going to be smart about this, let's do manageable. And I think that would be reasonable for any provider that's trying to do this work or trying to, nobody wants to overload themselves with too much, and so I just would consider that.
Thank you, Commissioner Wars. Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you so much, Mayor. This is Commissioner Hoffman. A couple of things I want to say. Being in the housing sector myself, working with the continuum of care at United Way, a young woman by the name of Tiana Williams brought a very creative solution with sprung structures. And what would that look like for our community? And I believe that this pod project was birthed out of that. And so I just want to give Ms. Tiana Williams a shout out for her creativity and opening up that door. The other piece I wanted to say is what we don't want to do as a city. And I heard some of the residents talk about what will happen in their neighborhood, right? We do not want to continue concentrating poverty in one area of the city. And so when I think about what we talked about earlier in the year about Conestoga Huts, there were some churches that were willing to put those on their property and their parking lots, and they would give access for water, bathrooms, things of that nature. I hope that we will involve the faith-based community again, because then that will break down how many units we have in one area and kind of spread it throughout the city. I also want to lift up, I am very much supportive of the emergency housing ordinance. And I will mention every single time that the population that will be served is missing the best in a huge, not the best, but the biggest population, and that's families with children. And so is there a way that these pods or whatever we're using can be, we can establish a family unit with one of those? We cannot forget that there are families with children. There are mothers out here working every day, paying bills, taking care of their children, and are not, we're not seeing them because they're invisible. And so I always want to lift that up as we do this work. And then the final thing that I wanted to say and ask is about community engagement. So once a project has been approved, is it on the agency to begin to do the community engagement, or is that prior to submitting that to get the letters of support to present to you all at the city? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. Yeah.
Thank you. In terms of the outreach, it is set up to happen prior to any approvals that are given by the city. So it's an but at the same time, we want the housing provider to have, their draft plan and their draft management plan, so they are able to speak and answer questions of the community during these meetings. So the way it's set up, it's a requirement for the application process, that gives time to be reactive to things that are heard. And it gives the housing provider a level of comfortability to talk about their project because they've thought through at least that first level of elements. And so they can speak to the different pieces, the management style, staffing 24 hours versus not, all of those type of details.
Thank you. And I just wanted to remind any agency or organization that may be on the call today that is thinking of potentially doing something creative like that, please make sure you do your community outreach because that will be key to you getting that support in the approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. Vice Mayor Cooney.
Thank you, Mayor. Wow, I think that the last remarks, the last two people that remarked especially were very much in line with what my thinking. I did have a question to start off with. The way I read the ordinance, my understanding is that there is 24-hour staffing. That's correct, right? Is that right? That the agency has to provide 24-hour staffing.
I'm going to go to the page to make sure that I am not misspeaking. The way I believe it is written is that is one type of security that the housing provider can provide is 24-hour staffing. But I want to read to make sure, not that it's required, but that is an option.
Does there have to be 24-hour security?
No. It's not required, but it is an option. It's something that is an option, and it's something that's going to be considered when we're determining the right number of occupants on a site at a time, because that's all part of the management plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we heard from some of the communities that we spoke to that 24-hour staffing became something key the larger the site was. Right. And then on smaller sites, at least that community felt comfortable without having 24-hour staffing on it. Again, just part of I just wanted to give you some background research. So if we wanted to give it as an option, but not a required option.
Okay. It says in the ordinance that there needs to be one secured entrance. Are you envisioning a fence around these pods?
Commissioner Cooney, would you mind telling me exactly where you're looking?
I don't have it right.
I have the right.
I thought it was 4.1.
That's Vice Mayor Cooney, not Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Mayor Cooney, you should have corrected me. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing exactly where it says that there has to be one secured entrance. We do talk about security measures. not limited to 24-hour staffing, secured entrances, or controlled access management, as one of the details that the housing provider needs to give the city when they apply.
So
you ask for landscape plans and fencing, depending on how, the site is set up. So those are things that they'll have to give us. Sorry.
Okay. So, okay, maybe I misread that, but I do know that in at least one other place, they do have a fence around with a secure an entrance that the people there have the entrance in, because they want to protect the people and they want to make sure that it's under control. But that's not, you don't find that in the ordinance.
What we say specifically is that they need to provide us with their proposed security measures, which may include any of the following: 24-hour staffing, secured entrances, and controlled access management, or all of them, right? Those are just some examples that would be we'd be looking for.
Okay. So this is an emergency ordinance, and we have an emergency. We have people in our community who are out there tonight in the freezing cold, and it's going to get worse. And we have to react to that. We have to do something about that. And I think that this is certainly a step forward to help our people. At the same time, I think that there were some real concerns raised in the comments that we heard that need to be attended to. The first one, absolutely, we know that this is not the solution to homelessness. This is something that we're going to really be working on in the days to come. I think there are real concerns from the neighborhood people, and I think we have to, I'm seeing that in the ordinance it says we have to reach out to people within 300 feet. That's a football field. I think we have to do some efforts to get beyond that football field and let the people in the neighborhood know that this is what is being proposed, and to get their input. I think that is really important. I totally agree with not concentrating poverty. That's a huge mistake if we would ever get into that. But look, other communities have worked this out. I don't understand that Kalamazoo can't work this out. I believe we can work this out. I believe that there are some common values here. Nobody wants people to freeze. Nobody wants people to be living out in weather like this. And we do want the neighborhoods to have their concerns met. So I think we can put it together, and I think we have to.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Cooney. Other questions or thoughts for discussion? Commissioner Hess.
Just a thought, as Commissioner, this is Jean Hess. As Commissioner Juarez was speaking, he was saying back in the day when we used to go to the Douglas and other areas, I don't think that emergency weather plan is going away. And just because we have some pods around the city doesn't mean that there's still not people out on the streets that need warming shelters when we have those extreme temperatures. So I just wanted us to know that there still is in place the plan through KDPS to make sure that folks are attended to in extreme temperatures.
Commissioner Decker.
Hi, yes, thank you, Mayor Anderson. I did have a quick question. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Anderson. Did you say that you already have the application online?
We put up a draft copy of the application with the draft of the ordinance online for review. So the community could understand what we'd be asking for and the different elements as I outlined them today in the ordinance. And we based that application on an existing application for technical review of projects, a building code technical review of projects, and kind of built off of that.
Okay. So do you have anyone that is any other organizations or nonprofits that have expressed interest?
I'll let Director Kidd answer that question.
Yeah, hi, Commissioner Decker. So like I've said, in the past couple years, we've been reached out to, we've had people contact us from different housing providers, different service providers, different coalitions and advocates have all contacted us. And so that's who we sent our email communications out to after I presented on November 15th. Kind of did this big blast email. I think what always confuses the community is that there are a lot of cities who have a housing authority and they build housing. We do not. The city does not build housing. We set the table. That's what these ordinances do. They set the table, but we need somebody to come and put the meal down, right? We've got to have a housing provider and a service provider, match made in heaven, come together and say, city, I got a property, I got a builder, I got a service provider, I'm ready to go. And we're like, great, we've got an application for you. We've got this MOU template for you. Please fill these out and we'll get you started on the process. We are just the process provider. So I think that that's really important, is that we do need people to come to us. It's not enough. Again, we're setting the table, we're making it legal, and we want your blessing to say this can happen for those people who want to come to us, because all the people who have come to me in the past, I've had to turn them away, right? I've had to say, no, I'm sorry, not yet. No, I'm sorry, we're not there. Well, if you do it in this really funky way, yes. And that's when people go, Rebecca, I ain't got time for that. So that's why this is an important moment for us to be able to say yes, like to the ideas that Commissioner Hoffman brought up with the sprung structures, with the reaching out to faith communities, putting these on church parking lots, having faith-based organizations be able to serve right there at their front door. That's what this is for. That's why it's as flexible as it is. This was not, actually, if you read through it, it's really not a great ordinance for a vacant parcel. It's really not. It needs a caretaker. It really does need, I mean, this is temporary, right? So this does need that plumbing, it needs a bathrooms, it needs these other facilities to come along with it. The better example is Commissioner Hoffman's example, where you have this partner, this synergistic relationship between what the pods are, or what the Conestoga huts are, or whatever that tiny house on wheels is, and that caretaker being right there is the ideal situation.
Okay, thank you for that. Just one more quick question. So if this was approved this evening, again, how long do you foresee to being the first pod put up and having someone in those?
So I'm not sure that we can accurately answer that question for you. What we can say is what time the housing provider would need to spend going through our process, right? I don't know where any individual housing provider is in terms of being ready to apply, make application. Once they do make application, our projects meetings, they're scheduled every week. So it's something easy for us to slide, get someone scheduled for the review. We need to make sure that the public meeting is noticed at least a week in advance prior to happening. That needs to happen before the application has completed its review. So it's probably, 2 to 3 weeks with us, right? 2 weeks would be very fast. It's probably 3 weeks, right, with us, in order to line all those things out. So I can answer from that perspective and what our work would be. I think, the more specifics would be for the housing providers themselves.
All right, thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Juarez.
So then the service providers that are, or maybe a faith-based organization, is there grants or monies from United Way or from the city that could, because I don't know, like, I don't know too many service providers that can say, well, we can pay a person or a couple people to do 24 hours, or we can hire a security agency to come. I mean, what kind of dollars are attached to this partnership? Like you said, this Match Made in Heaven partnership, maybe through United Way, Continuum of Care, the city of Kalamazoo. I'm not sure. Maybe that might be helpful for us to understand.
Hi, Commissioner Juarez. This is Director Kick. I can't speak for funds that the Continuum of Care has or the United Way. I can only speak for funds that the city has. But the city has two different pots of money for, we have our Housing for All Fund, which funds small developments of 4 units or more. And we have funded several different initiatives that have already occurred within the city. But that would be one way to make again, very quick grant application. We have grant dollars, we have loan dollars for these services. And some of those are HUD dollars. And so it would be the capacity of the organization as well. Have they worked with housing and urban development funds in the past? Because we do have specific care and COVID dollars. Unfortunately, some of those dollars, they want a project that's going to last 15 years. You know, they don't want to do a temporary project. But we do have Foundation for Excellence dollars that we could look into. So it's really going to have to depend on the project. But certainly as projects come in, if they do have financial need, I would love to know about it and would love to be able to see between those partnerships, like you mentioned, United Way, Continuum of Care, our Foundation for Excellence dollars, or our Housing and Urban Development dollars, how can we assist them in making this come together?
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I will jump in now just with some thoughts and questions. I appreciate this extended conversation. Just a quick question here. I mean, the premise here this evening, number one, we are not approving a site. We are not taking action to say this particular spot is, is going to be approved, and this is the size of what's going to happen there, and here's going to do it. So that's not what's happening. And I just want to provide some clarity to that, because I believe that there has been possibly some misrepresentation of the action that we're taking tonight that's appeared in the press. So I just want to be clear about that. What the action is we are being asked to take is, in essence, to allow for a temporary response to occur related to providing temporary housing that is not, normal, standard, built units to occur in the city. So that's purely the action that we're taking. And in addition, in large measure, this action is to then offload the responsibility for the process for the approvals to our good city staff. So that's why each one of these, Commissioner Pradel, will not come back to the City Commission for approval. We are in essence entrusting city staff, based on the components of this ordinance, to review applications, to make appropriate decisions with all the expected structure that is called for in this particular ordinance. I do have one question related to that, though. If there is a proposal for something to be located on property owned by the city, is there any portion of that application which would come back to the City Commission?
Attorney Robinson, would you like to address that question, please?
That is a question of, and I don't have the city's property resolution in front of me. I guess it would depend. given the fact is how long would it be and some of the other considerations. Obviously, the city would be a party to that agreement. And I'd have to look at this property management resolution as to determine whether or not that would come back to the city commission. It's conceivable it could, but on the other hand, I can't say it would in every circumstance.
Okay, maybe or maybe not then. All right. So, hey, just a few things here, I guess, in no particular order that don't necessarily wholly address this, but I just want to say a few things right now as we're all talking about it. It's freezing outside right now. And, you know, we're concerned about how quickly this will go. So I just want to remind people that, that this is a county issue, not a city issue alone. That's why it is the Kalamazoo County Continuum of Care. That is why the Kalamazoo County, you know, passed the Housing for All, you know, millage, because people in the county care about it. This is obviously a county responsibility. And, you know, one of the members of that team that built that winning coalition to get that passed was our own Commissioner Hoffman here. So this is a county, not just a city issue. So there's no reason why any of these, you know, temporary locations couldn't be somewhere else. Don't have to be in the city. We're just addressing the city ordinance to allow for that to happen in the city. But as with so many things that happen in the county as it relates to issues of houselessness, you know, all of the shelters that are in Kalamazoo County happen to be in the city of Kalamazoo. And as of really this month, December, we will have 10 shelters operating in the city of Kalamazoo, 10 shelters. And I'll just run through some of those real quickly, just so people know. There's a couple open door shelters. There's a YWCA shelter. There is a veteran specific shelter. There's the Oakland House shelter. There's the Step Up Family shelter. There's the Lantern House Low Barrier shelter. There's Catholic Charities shelter for youth. There is the Kalamazoo Gospel Ministries shelter, which by the end of this month will have, you know, increased their capacity by 200 beds. And there's a soon to be opened LGBTQI plus shelter, which was developed by the Public Housing Commission and will be in partnership with Outfront Kalamazoo and CARES, and will be soon open and operating under the auspices of Outfront. Actually, there's 11 shelters, and the last one is Bethany House Shelter, which is a shelter for women who are committed to recovering their children. So actually 11 shelters operating in the city of Kalamazoo. And on any given night right now, there are 150 or more empty shelter beds. So I don't want people to think there is no place for people to be tonight. Tonight, there are shelter beds available for people who choose to take advantage of that. And that amounts to all those shelters, including the expansion at Kalamazoo Gospel Ministries, about 750 shelter beds. So by the end of December, about 150 shelter beds available on any given night now. That number will increase to 350 by the end of December. So let's not forget that there are options available, and that many of those options, one way or another, are supported by the city of Kalamazoo. They're in the city of Kalamazoo. So I just want to keep that in mind. Also, other things that are very, very important to me, and I think this ordinance addresses that, but came up in our questions, things like transparency. You know, we should be doing this in the light of day. We should not be making decisions that are predetermined before there's outreach, before there's communication. And I appreciate that comments were made, you know, that going in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals is an avenue that requires that. And this is, in essence, providing a way to do a workaround on that. But because it's incorporated into this ordinance, that there must be some outreach, that there must be community engagement, that provides that opportunity for transparency and for community input. Something else, which just a variety of things, I do have great concerns about the idea of automatically concentrating, activities like this in low-income neighborhoods, where people are also perhaps, struggling to keep their own roof over their heads. And is this going to add some additional challenges? And we certainly do not want that to happen. We heard from folks who had businesses and were living adjacent, to some of the unstructured camping that was occurring in Kalamazoo, and there were some challenges. So we don't want that repeated. So that's something to be sensitive about. Best practices. I know, this is not just happening in Kalamazoo, and I really laud city staff for reaching out where other places where this are occurring, but we have heard some very specific recommendations, Commissioner Juarez, related to best practices, and there were hard numbers in some of those recommendations that literally said, we've tried this, we've learned this, don't go above 20. 10 is better. We've heard those kinds of recommendations from people doing that work. For example, in places like Eugene, Oregon, very, very clear best practice recommendations. And I know we're trying to be flexible and not set some numbers, but we can't ignore that either. We can't ignore the work that folks have been doing and the reasons for that. And also another thing to keep in mind, and this perhaps, I think it's very important we're doing this, but another thing to keep in mind is that another best practice is a recommendation for structure and expectations and creating a manageable situation that is safe for participants and safe for their new neighbors. And I don't want to say this is an absolute, but it is the case that as you begin to create structure and expectations, there will be people, who will not be interested in participating with that. And there could still be folks, this will not solve every problem when it comes to that. And there are people who have chosen not to participate in the shelter system for a variety of reasons, but one of them is the structure and the expectations. And as they begin to experience what expectations there might be for their own safety, but for neighborhood safety around camping locations, they may decide that that's not for me. So, that's probably a hard fact that this still will not serve every person who is unsheltered and unhoused. And we're spending a great deal of time talking about it tonight, but I want to address what Commissioner Hoffman said, is that we're going to have the same urgency and intention when it comes to addressing housing issues for families in particular that happen to make up the majority of our houseless population in Kalamazoo County. Not as visible, because families, generally speaking, are not outside and visible in that same way, but we need to bring the same urgency to that kind of conversation. Frankly, I would suggest perhaps more, but I guess that's for everyone to think about. But it comes to families and children, I think that gets to the top of my list. So that all said, here we are. This is perhaps another option that we're providing. And, I'm supportive of options. I've definitely been thinking and talking about the idea of structured camping opportunities now for, some time now here in Kalamazoo. But I would just want to remind us that this is, let's be transparent. Let's be sensitive to all input. Let's deploy and employ best practices when it comes to evaluating these applications. And let's make sure that if we don't do this right, if this ends up being a challenge for our community, well, then I think it is less likely that we're going to have community support for these kinds of creative options going forward. So let's just make sure we do it right. But I'm supportive of this effort. And I do want to say that I really do appreciate the time and attention to detail that that Director Kick, Planner Anderson have brought to this. I think that there's certainly not something that's just being decided at a moment's notice. There's a lot of thoughtful input that's been brought to us here that does attempt to answer really most of the questions, I would say, that came to us earlier in the evening.
Mayor?
Manager, yes, City Manager Ritzman.
Sorry, I just want to add to what was said about the neighboring jurisdictions and then you saying, this is a countywide issue. And the way it came across from staff was that, we would do this at the staff level. What we found is, like with gun violence, it's actually more effective if the electeds get together, because that's where the staff are going to go, is to their electeds to make any decisions about resources or whatever. So I would just put that out there, that like gun violence and what was done with the county, that's a good model for how we handle this issue of housing as a neighboring or as a community-wide, county-wide issue, not just a Kalamazoo issue.
Thank you, Manager Ritzman. Any other questions for staff or discussion? I really appreciate everybody's input into this and everybody's concerns and support. So seeing no discussion, the recommended action is a motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Hoffman. Is there a second?
Or
Second from Commissioner Pradel. Other discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Borling, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Juarez,
Yes.
Commissioner Pradel,
yes.
Vice Mayor Cooney,
Yes.
Mayor Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Decker,
Yes.
Commissioner Hess.
Yes.
Thank you, Commission. The motion passes. Next are reports and legislation. City Manager Ritzma, do you have a report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask our Deputy Chief, David Boyson, to jump on here and give an update on where we stand as a department, as a city, relative to the OIR recommendations that were given back in September. And Deputy Chief has an update on where we're at with all of that. So I'd like him to share that with you and the community. Chief?
Hey, good evening. If I could get them to allow my camera to go on. Host stopped my camera, so. Okay.
There you are.
Hi, I'm here. Well, thank you, sir, and good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, and city leadership. Appreciate the opportunity to give an update. We are coming up on almost 90 days since the original OIR report came out, outlining 40 recommendations for public safety. And since then, we have worked very hard to implement the recommendations by the OIR group. And a lot of these recommendations have really helped us to improve our policies and procedures So they were very thoughtful recommendations, and I think it's going to make, again, our policies and procedures much better. And we've learned a lot since the summer of 2020. So we broke these down into a 30, 60, and 90-day timeline. And just to report out of the 40 recommendations put forward by the OIR group, we have completed 30 of those recommendations. Of the remaining 10 recommendations, 7 of those are basically complete, but they're contingent upon the convening of a focus group that the city manager and chief are in the process of putting together, so that we can bring those recommendations in front of this focus group for final vetting and approval before we implement them in our policies and procedures. And then there are 3 that we are still working at that are in progress, and I can give updates on those. But just to highlight some of the recommendations to our policy 430, which is our First Amendment assembly policy, really 4 of the main things that were brought, improvements in this. The main one was improved communication. So just to highlight some of the improved communication that was recommended by the OIR that is now in our policy 430. And just to read from our communications plan, and that is really ongoing communication with event organizers, city commission, county, and community stakeholders, media, and others before, during, and after protest demonstrations and rallies will play an important role with the success of the event. So really improved communications throughout will have a much better outcome. And we've actually implemented a lot of these things already. If you recall, we had some protests earlier this spring where we implemented a lot of these recommendations, and we really had much better outcomes implementing these new procedures. The other thing that we really learned a lot from 2020, and it was recommended in the OIR report, is really analyzing and crowd dynamics and realizing that all incidents, all protests are not the same. And so one of the things that this outlines in our new policy 430 is public safety officers and supervisors must understand the importance of differentiating between violent members of the crowd and peaceful protesters. When possible, officers should interact with crowd members in an effort to communicate law enforcement support of lawful First Amendment activities and the rights of free speech and expression. And so really, we know that many times there were peaceful protesters mixed in with some people that were not peaceful. And really our policies and procedures now really give us the flexibility to deal with those. So we're not dealing with each in a cookie cutter type fashion. So again, we've had much better outcomes implementing some of those initiatives. The other thing that was brought up is intervention techniques, including use of chemical munitions. And so we've really looked at changing our guidelines and procedures for the use, in particular with the CS gas or tear gas, and using chemical munitions. And our policy now, based on some of these recommendations, has been changed that now the use of CS as a dispersal agent will only be authorized in situations where crowd behavior is demonstrating active aggression or destruction of property, and immediate action is necessary to stop violence and or prevent property damage. So again, we learned from the curfew situation that now we must have active aggression or destruction of property before these things would be approved by a supervisor. And then finally, one of the things that was recommended is improve updated dispersal orders. And our staff worked with the city attorney, Mr. Robinson, there to come up with our event guidance and patrol officer scripts. So we have scripts for all of these events now that we work to put together. So everyone will be on the same page. And the script is basically 3 levels of the script. The first is level 0, which is before the event begins. And that's that, again, talking about the communication improvements, that's contact with organizers and social media to put the word out that, Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety respects the rights to assemble and to speak on matters of public concern under the U.S. and Michigan constitutions. and talk about the allowing those First Amendment assemblies and talk about what we can do to improve the outcomes of those events, working with those coordinators. The next level would be PA announcements to people gathered. That's when no criminal activity is occurring, but to communicate our support to the right to peacefully protest. And then also that criminal acts against persons and property will not be allowed, including assaultive behavior, damaging property, and impeding traffic. And we ask for their support in removing individuals who may be interfering with someone's peaceful assembly, and that by working together, we can maintain safety for all. That's a level 1 announcement. A level 2 announcement comes if there is criminal activity occurring. We make those announcements and we give specific examples of what criminal activity is occurring. And we ask that behavior to stop. And we ask for support in removing those criminal actors from your peaceful assembly. Again, repeating that by working together, we can maintain safety for all. And then the last level we have is the level 3 announcements, which when we do have unlawful activity and that turns into riotous behavior, that's when we create the police zone, give out specific directions on exactly where that zone is, where the means of egress, where we want people to leave, and then we repeat those orders after 5 minutes and repeat them again after 10 minutes before any enforcement action is taken. So very specific, and everyone's on the same page with the language in those. So those are some of the highlights of policy 430. Those are on the 30 and 60-day recommendation plan. There's some on the 90-day recommendation plan that we are almost complete with. One of those is developing mutual aid agreements with our partners. That was one of the recommendations that KPS developed mutual aid agreements with partner agencies at a minimum requires assisting agencies to document and share information regarding incident reports, arrests, and use of force. So those agreements between our partner agencies have been finalized. They are awaiting approval from some of our partner agencies from their council. And so we should have those all complete very soon. And then the last thing that we're on the 90-day plan that was recommendation is that all citizen complaints that were made during the 2020 events, that they all be complete. I can report that of the 10 investigations that are pending, one has been complete. So there are 9 open investigations, and we are in the process of working on those. We had some staffing issues with our internal affairs office. The captain was on military leave. He comes back Monday, and as soon as he comes back Monday, he will be tasked with completing the 9 open investigations. So again, we've made pretty good progress, and just waiting again for that community group to convene for that focus group so we can wrap up some of those remaining 10 items that are still outstanding.
Thank you very, very much, Assistant Chief Boyson. I appreciate the update on all that. Any questions at this point? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Night.
Anything else, Manager Ritzma?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Clerk Borling, do you have a report?
Yes, Your Honor. In the agenda packet for tonight's meeting is a petition from Carol Mullen for your consideration. In the petition, there's a request for various safety changes at Fraternity Village Drive. So that's there in your agenda packet for tonight. That is all.
Thank you very much, Clerk Borling. Commissioners may remember that a young woman, I think, was died with on Fraternity Village Drive. And there's been some community concerns expressed about speed of traffic and lack of sidewalks in some areas and that sort of thing. I believe it's related to that. Next is item K, which is policy items. And we have item K1, City Manager Ritzma.
I will turn things over to our City Attorney Robinson, who prepared this rule change of the city commission to go back to in-person meetings at the beginning of the year.
Attorney Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson. City Attorney Clyde Robinson speaking. This is the proposed rule changes to the City Commission rules to go back to face-to-face meetings. And actually it would go as, and it's a little unclear when you want to begin that. The state law would permit you to go through the end of this year. Then you would have to begin that first meeting in January face-to-face. There was some discussion at the last commission meeting about doing this sooner rather than later, maybe as early as the meeting on the 20th of this month. That's an option. And if that's the direction you want to go, you have to make some tweaks into the rules, but it's doable. You currently, if you made it effective tonight, that would kind of, you need to push it off because it's already been announced you're going to have a workshop next week that will be virtual. So you don't want the rules to go into effect tonight's meeting and then have them not be able to sync with your virtual meeting a week from now. So you're going to have to do something along those lines, and I'll guide you through that. What I'm looking for primarily is some guidance as to how soon you want these rules to take effect, as early as the 20th or as late as January 3rd. Along those lines, there have been, and I've outlined in the agenda report what those changes are. Basically, it conforms with state law by permitting only city commissioners who are on active military service to participate by virtual means. If you are not in that situation, the only way you can participate in a meeting is to be present. The one exception to engaging in a remote meeting is that if you are participating or eligible to promote by remote means, you would not be able to permit, or you would not be permitted to participate in closed sessions, given the fact that closed sessions are closed and you have no control over somebody else who might be on a military base across the globe and who else might be privy to that information. So that's the one exception. This Open Meetings Act is silent on to that, so you clearly are within your ability to say, if you want to participate remotely, you won't be able to participate in closed sessions. However, that individual would be permitted to vote on whether to go into closed session because they're under the Open Meetings Act, they may fully participate and vote on matters. The other thing is we've changed where public comment. There was, again, some desire on the part of commissioners to continue this hybrid or bifurcated call-in. Rather than having recorded messages, people will call in and they will be played as they occur. And then people who are in the audience who are present would be able to state and approach the commission and make their public comments. So as a result, public comments are moved earlier in the meeting. Before the COVID rules hit, public comments were reserved till after the regular agenda. Now they're in the history of the commission rules, they've moved public comments around both early and late. In fact, even before the change, there was some commissioners who urged maybe permitting public comments earlier in the meeting so that individuals could state their piece, then walk. They didn't have to sit throughout the entire meeting in order to make their comments known. So that is going to be permitted going forward, at least in the short term. And you can experiment with how you want to, whether hybrid comments will work. However, because what I've noticed is that there is more participation when you can call in with the ease of sitting in your living room or your kitchen and making that comment. There's been more of it, and that's good. But on the other hand, 4 minutes per person takes a lot of time. And what we did when we went to the COVID rules is that we shrunk that down to 3 minutes. And that seems to have worked well. And that is the general standard throughout the state. Again, I've done surveys from time to time, and that's where most communities tend to land. The only exception would be because, again, we have the committee of the whole. That is another experiment that was due to end at the end of the year. That's being continued, again, based upon the comments of the commission made when this was discussed earlier. So those meetings will essentially take place at 5 o'clock. But because you have kind of it can be sometimes a lot of presentations and you're bumping up against that 7 o'clock hour, public comments in those meetings will be reduced to 2 minutes. Again, because it is committee of the whole, this is really your meeting for you to get information. It's not really intended to have engender a lot of public comment or public input at workshops and at committee of the whole meetings. So, but still you have to have an opportunity for public comment. So at those times, comment will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Again, both in terms for people who are present at the meeting and people who are wishing to call in and make a comment. So those are the highlights of the changes that are being proposed. Again, I just need a little bit of direction from the commission as to how soon do you want these rules to go into effect and start meeting face to face. Obviously, one of the concerns that we would have is, given the Omicron variant that is now in the United States, apparently that is a more contagious variant. But on the other hand, at least based on what I've heard in the news, it is not as debilitating as the original coronavirus 19 and the Delta variant. So while it may be more easily caught, I don't think it will be as debilitating, at least initially. That seems to be the science on this newest variant. But that said, given the fact that we are going to be in the throes of continued Delta variant and the new Omicron variant, there is a set of rules that are being put in place for people to, if you're going to come to a city commission meeting, you're going to be requested, whether you're vaccinated or not, to mask up. The only exceptions would be is if you have a legitimate religious, sincerely held religious belief, or you've got a legitimate reason of disability that would not permit you to wear a mask. In those circumstances, you'd still be permitted to attend, but you must socially distance yourself from other individuals. The only people you would be able to sit near would be members of your same household. So anybody else, you'd have to socially distance yourself at least 6 feet from those other individuals if you are not able to mask up. So that's kind of the way that's being approached in terms of protecting both the public health and the health of those individuals who are present at a meeting.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt somebody? Thank you, Attorney Robinson. So basically, there's a set of city commission rules which we can modify over time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, those are within our purview. What we do not have in front of us is deciding whether we're going to meet in person or not after January 1st. That's a given. We can, unless something changes between now and the end of December, but this is proposing some adjustments to rules to allow for some hybrid input and some masking expectations and that sort of thing that we could deploy as soon as the 20th or wait until January. Are there questions from commission for Attorney Robinson? Commissioner Bradle.
Yeah, I just, one question I just had is in terms of, I'm struggling to envision enforcement. I mean, I think, obviously we do our best to try to, make sure that this is clear that people understand these are the rules, and it outlines, that people can effectively be ejected from the meetings if they don't follow those rules. The one that I think I'm struggling the most with envisioning is, say if you have a hot button issue that a lot of people want to show up and speak on and 100 people show up, it's hard for me to envision how we would ever be able to enforce the 6-foot rule. That's not to say that we shouldn't strive for that again, but I just want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up for like awkward, tense situations with people. And then just kind of figuring out like how we address those if we do get confrontation from somebody. And I don't know I'm not sure in your role as city attorney how you would necessarily reconcile that here tonight, but it's certainly something I think we should take some consideration on.
Well, Commissioner Pradel, you raise an excellent point, and unfortunately, do you legislate for the extreme, or do you legislate for what you might say is the normal run-of-the-mill situation? The commission chambers does have in normal times a capacity number that's on the back of it's on a card on the back wall that is in terms of what the fire load would permit. I'm saying that I'm sure that on occasion that number's been exceeded, and while you don't want to do that every night, and on the other hand, are you exceeding it by 1 or 2 people, or are you exceeding it by 50 people? Obviously, it's a physical space, and there's only so many individuals that you can comfortably accommodate in the commission chamber. If it's anticipated that there's going to be a large turnout, again, it's sometimes you can predict that, sometimes you can't. There's certainly other ways we can do that in terms of we do have other space in the building, but again, it's an older building. The Open Meetings Act didn't exist in the 1930s when this building was built in terms of accommodating great numbers of people and having the opportunity to speak. We can do things with the community room. We can maybe do things with the atrium. You have to think about it, but there's some things that can be done in order to make sure that people can view what's going on and still participate. Whether we put monitors in the hall and have people line up out the hall as they wait their turn to speak, or whatever it happens to be. But I rather than trying to legislate for that extreme scenario, I tried to keep it simple, because at this point, we're going back to regular meetings. I don't anticipate there being issues of substance. There may be. I don't have a crystal ball, but a good example is the number of speakers who spoke tonight in regard to the emergency housing ordinance. It was not an inordinate number of people who spoke, and I think that number of people could have been accommodated in a face-to-face meeting. On the other hand, we've had a couple of meetings that have gone into the small hours of the morning because you had 50 or more speakers who wanted to state their mind on an issue. And we can see what we can do to accommodate that.
Manager Ritzma.
Yeah, actually, Deputy City Manager Chamberlain has been working on this with folks and city staff, and there is a plan to how to accommodate large gatherings if they do occur. So, DC and Chamberlain.
Thank you, Manager Richmond. This is Jeff Chamberlain, Deputy City Manager. City Attorney Robinson touched on it, but we do have plans that people can watch the meeting and still participate for overflow rooms. So basically would use the community room and the 3rd floor conference room. And we've done that before in years past, and so we can do that again. We also have new air filters installed in City Hall, plasma air filters that are actually built into the units. Those are now throughout City Hall. And we also have portable air filters that are in the community chambers, the commission chambers, and in the community room. So those are there now.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, well then, at this point, what is being proposed under this policy item, is in our agenda packet. Do we want to have some discussion about timing on this at this point?
If I
Before we
may,
get to
Mayor,
this?
if I may, I think that's an excellent suggestion so that I can get a feel for where the commission wants to go, and then I can suggest a language that might reflect the consensus of that discussion.
Okay, I appreciate that, Attorney Robinson. Thoughts on timing? January 3rd, when we have to go back? Is other proposals? Commissioner Decker, were you going to say something?
Yes, this is Commissioner Decker. I definitely think that, we do need to get back to in person, and that's coming regardless if we want it or not, come January. I know that Ellis City staff has been doing a lot to make sure that the residents are safe, the community is safe when they come in, and the commission is safe. I think just to make sure that they have everything or their ducks in a row, and they're going to be able to accommodate the people that will be there, just maybe letting it go until January 3rd would probably be the best, especially with the holiday season just coming off of Thanksgiving, now going into Christmas where people will be traveling a lot more further. I just think that it would be better just to wait until January 3rd, make sure all of the precautions are put into place, and that we are not making it an inferno or an incubator for something to spread within the community.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker.
Yes.
Other thoughts?
I'm just going to second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Hess.
Commissioner Hess, thank you, Commissioner Decker, for bringing that forward. We should start the new year in person.
I guess I'll submit to the wisdom of the council.
Thank you, Commissioner Warres. Any other discussion on that? Commissioner Prado?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Commissioner Decker said. I think, especially given that the rates are so high, I think we should just run the clock as far as we can to keep people safe. I think that's what leadership is. And, after that last meeting where we brought this up, if anybody wants to see it, I got some emails from some people, thanking me for speaking up, because they basically, echoed that same sentiment that they would not have come to meetings. They wouldn't have,
yeah.
And, I'll be perfectly honest with you, as much as I'm a big civic government nerd with 3 little kids at home, 2 of which, are just barely second vaccinated, and with 1-year-old, I'd have to really think twice, and I'd have to be pretty dang passionate about whatever I'm showing up to City Hall for, even come January, on my own accord, as a citizen, as a resident, to show up to voice what I care about. So I think the onus on us to be incredibly thoughtful about how we can reassure and keep people safe is going to be important. And that room, for anybody who's familiar with it, is beautiful. It's historic. It's an inspiring space to work in. But you get a crowd of 100 people crammed in there, and you're in there like hot sardines, and it gets hot and it gets stinky. And so you can only imagine, everybody in there, breathing whatever they're breathing, and it goes from being like a breezy day at the beach to a hurricane of COVID cocktail, if you will. So I just think, we need to continue to be thoughtful about that. And maybe it's something that we kind of learn from as we go on, but I don't know. I still think there's going to be, a lot of people that are just going to be like, I'll take a pass on this, and I think that's unfortunate, because I think there are things that we can do to continue to keep people engaged and give them ways to give input. So that's just my 2 cents. I know we don't really have a choice in the matter, like you said, Commissioner Decker, and I'm ready to do what I need to do to be there. So.
So I agree with the sentiments that have been expressed myself. So Attorney Robinson, do you have some language you're going to propose then for this resolution?
I would suggest this, since the consensus appears to be to push this off until January 3rd, I would suggest that you don't take action tonight on this, that it comes back in 2 weeks and you can adopt it then, effective January 1st, if you will. And because you're not changing anything, you're going to continue to use the rules that you're operating under tonight and for the next 2 weeks. So there's no real need to take action on that tonight.
Commissioner Pradel.
So my only reservation about this, and maybe you can clarify this a little bit more, City Attorney, is so what happens if we, we have a reason where we have to cancel our meeting on the 20th for some reason, or, I mean, it's kind of running the clock, and that's our last meeting where we can vote, take action to come back. So would it be just a matter of like arranging a special session then that we would have to do to vote to come back? And I'm just wondering if maybe it would just make more sense to do it tonight, just on the off chance that we're running the clock and there's only one more chance to vote to come back in person.
Well, I assume that we're going to meet on the 20th. And if we can't, if there's a snowstorm or something, you can always have a special meeting anytime between the 20th and the 31st. Now, again, I know that the Christmas holiday is in the middle there, but quite frankly, the 24th and 25th are on a Friday and Saturday, so you'd have the entire next week to call a special meeting just for the purpose of adopting new rules. So I suggest, given the way I've worded the resolution, because I did not know, again, what the desire of the commission was, and now that I have a better idea, I'd like to rework it a little bit to make it clear that it goes into effect beginning with the new year instead of sometime earlier. I was working from the assumption that you were going to change these rules sooner rather than later. And when I worked on this, it was just around the Thanksgiving holiday. We really weren't subject to I think the news had just kind of broke about the Omicron variant. And who knew, again, how that was going to play out. So my suggestion is that you don't take action tonight, postpone this until for 2 weeks and then adopt it then.
Thank you, Attorney Robinson. Manager Ritzma.
Yeah, I would just note too that the way it stands right now, the 20th would be a virtual meeting, which we've not canceled one virtual meeting yet. So if we were meeting in person and a snowstorm came, yeah, we cancel meetings, but virtually it's more than likely that we'll meet.
You okay with that, Commissioner Pradel? Okay.
Mayor, I was just thinking more of like a scenario, like what happens if power went out in the city?
Sure.
It just seemed like kind of a little bit reckless to just put all your eggs in a basket for one meeting to make an act that we have to vote on to come back. So that's,
right.
Yeah,
I get it. Well, I guess Attorney Robinson wants to finesse the motion just a little bit and maybe look at some details on it. So,
and
if it's okay. What's that?
I might also point out, we're going to have business on the 20th. There's already some things that I'm already preparing for that agenda.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All righty. So then we'll just, without any disagreement there, we'll just move ahead. We won't take action on that. Don't have any new business. So we are down to commissioner comments. Commissioner Juarez.
Man, I'm lucky I get to go first. I don't have too many comments, other than I'm pretty excited still. And I just want the public to know, the residents of Kalamazoo to know that it is impossible for us to do the work as a commission if we don't have their support. Though we might have different opinions and different standpoints in different topics and subjects that might come up, the best way that I've ever seen or looked in my time for a city to move forward and to be whole is for all parts of the city to work together. And the residents of this community are a super important part. Your concerns, your comments, your efforts, maybe the efforts that you're not doing, whatever it is. I'm on my little flyers when I was handing them out on the door to door. It said, "Moving Kalamazoo forward together," right? And it's that togetherness that will actually cause transformation for our community. When we can say, though I'm an avid, hardworking individual against gun violence, I'm going to support housing. I'm going to support the efforts with homelessness. I'm going to support the environmental stuff. I'm going to, together, when it's not, when we make it about what's right and not who's right, we can see great results. But that means not making it about me, not making it about what I want, making it about what's best for our community. And sometimes what's best for our community is not, I might not like that, but it's what's needed. And so I just wanted to encourage our community, and the residents of our community, the business owners, the churches, the nonprofits, that we need to do this together. There's no way that our city can be restored and be whole and healthy if we don't do it together. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Morris. See a hand up. Commissioner Decker, do you want to go next?
Yes, I can talk. Thank you, Mayor Anderson. Commissioner Decker, and I just have to echo again what Commissioner Juarez says. He's correct, moving Kalamazoo forward. And I think that we are definitely on the path to do that, especially, passing the emergency ordinance for the pods. Because that does show that we are trying to move forward. We are trying to do something. We know that it is an issue. I also think that on the 3 agenda items that I was not able to vote on because of a conflict of interest, G7, G13, and G14, that all ties back into the, complete neighborhoods that we have again, and being able to sell or buy these particular parcels of land is really what's going to enable to help these organizations and the city start to be able to put housings on there, so they're ready when that time frame comes for people to transition from the pods to a permanent housing. So thank you guys for all the work that you do. I'm glad to be here with you guys. I know we're definitely doing great things. And we do need the community to stand behind us. And we do need to make sure that they are informed of things that are happening, because just like it affects us, it also affects them even more, because, we are picking areas and neighborhoods that this is going to have a great impact on. And we need everyone to be on the same page. We need everyone to get the same information, in a timely manner, and to be able to really have the input at all of the organizations that we work with. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. Commissioner Hess.
Thank you, both Commissioner Juarez and Commissioner Decker, for lifting up the togetherness and the collegiality that we need to move this city forward. The only thoughts I have this evening are in response to the darkening of our days right now. And tonight is the last night of Hanukkah, where we light the light, to bring in the light. We are looking to the Christmas season, where it's the coming of the light. So I'm going back to my Kalamazoo College roots, where the motto is Lux Esto, which is be light, be light. And so tonight, we need to be light for each other in challenging times. in challenging times of violence, of separation, of loss, of COVID. So we need to be light for one another. That means being kind, being generous, listening, giving humor, having compassion and care, or even just giving a smile, as Pastor Addis Moore would say. There's a lot of hurting here and beyond, and we hear it a lot from the folks who call, and we hear it in the emails and the people that we live with. But we can be the light. That's what we have to be. The examples from tonight's agenda, it was on the consent agenda, but kudos to Jacob Tardani, who is a developer, and for his commitment to creating more affordable housing units and continuing to do so in the city. Congratulations to him. The housing ordinance is the emergency housing is a spark of light. It's a spark of light that is going to help us move this city forward. Tammy Taylor is a spark of light. Kalamazoo County Ready Force is a light to this community, to children and families. Mary Brown was light to this community. Director Baker and his excellent presentation, and his staff and everyone that works on behalf of the people of this city are the light to the city, literally the light to the city. And then thanks to Pastor James Harris for getting us going. But we need to be light for one another. Lux Esto, Kalamazoo.
Thank you, Commissioner Hess. Commissioner Pradel?
Sure. Hey, thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to thank everyone who reached out to us, public comment tonight. And just this is the kind of night that gets me fired up to be on City Commission. You know, you got people on both sides, viewpoints and conflicting viewpoints in the case of agenda item H tonight. And, you know, they're sharing their opinions, they're being thoughtful and kind to each other, but they're still, you know, sharing where they feel about things. And it was great to hear everybody on this commission speak up and share their thoughts as well. So I really enjoyed it. It gets me fired up to be here with you. I don't know if anybody wants to take a guess of how many downloads there have been so far of the fiscal year 2022 budget. Only 41. And the fiscal year 2020 budget had almost like 3,000 downloads as of like the last time I checked. So we got to get people engaged and excited to check out their next year budget and to dive into it, see what it's about. Just a reminder to the community that on December 13th at 6 o'clock, we'll have a virtual work session on the budget. So it's basically going to give everybody the cliff notes, so you don't have to dive into that giant document. But just, you know, really encourage people to check it out and get involved with that process as well. You saw on the consent agenda tonight that Verberg Park, there's going to be some work done by the EPA here coming up pretty soon, and that will impact one of the really the only launch sites there is on the Kalamazoo River for almost a 35-mile stretch. And so, you know, some people have reached out with some concern about that. I talked to one of the leaders of the Kalamazoo River Alliance earlier this morning to talk about that. We did hear back from the director of Parks and Rec, and he did indicate that part of that project with EPA is that they're going to improve the launch site at Mayor's Riverfront Park. So just so people are aware of that as well. I was just going to mention as well, I was wondering, I don't know if anybody from city staff has had a chance to reach out to the citizen petition and the contact from that as well, from that Fraternity Village Drive petition. But I think we as commissioners got an email back about some of the steps that Public Services is already looking into or taking, but I just want to make sure that somebody looped back to check in with those individuals who are passionate about that petition drive. And last but not least, I had someone also reach out to speak up about the speakers in our City Hall chambers for City Commission. And I do remember this, like, you know, being somebody who sat in the audience for a while, when you have one of the bigger meetings, it can be really challenging for people in the back to hear. And I don't know if that's maybe something that we can strive for, just for, you know, maybe trying to find some ways to make it easier to hear in the back of the room with speakers or whatnot, as we're, you know, making steps to improve that space as well. But I just wanted to make sure to lift that up as well, that somebody had reached out about that, and I would tend to agree with them on that. So that's all I have. Wishing everybody a great night. Please be safe on the roads.
Thank you, Commissioner Pradel. Commissioner Hoffman?
Thank you all for being here this evening. It's getting late and I'm sending you all love and light. And we're going to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. Vice Mayor Cooney.
Well, I just thought my colleagues were very eloquent tonight, and I really appreciated that. And I really appreciated the dialogue. As Commissioner Juarez was saying, it wasn't about individuals, it was about what's good for the city. And I just want to say, over the weekend, I was in Philadelphia. Philadelphia's had 500 murders this year. Chicago has had well over 1,000. Their problems seem insurmountable. Our problems are manageable. And my goal is to join with you and to make this city a national model. We can do that. Our problems are manageable and we have the resources to meet those problems. And my goal while I'm up here is to fight to make this city a national model.
Amen, brother. A lot of head nodding on that one. I was going to say something real quick that's not nearly as profound, Vice Mayor, but I just wanted to, staff, please follow up with Jeff Wiseman. He calls in about lights. I mean, he is the volunteer lights out guy, and he has been doing that for a decade. And we hear that from a variety of neighborhoods, but this shouldn't be a hard thing to do. I always feel like I don't have an immediate answer for that when some particular lights are pointed out that they're not working. And I just do want to remind people, it's been mentioned several times here, but you know, we had a lot of discussion on an item or two here, but lots of things happened on our consent agenda tonight related to creating housing, relating to protecting water with wellhead protection, relating to a $1 million grant to help us do fantastic things over at the market. So make sure you don't ignore that consent agenda. That does not mean those are not important items that appear there. I guess that's just an effort to keep these meetings, perhaps ending on the same day they start. But a lot of good work happens there on the consent agenda. It's a pleasure serving with all of you. Thank you to everyone who stuck with us this evening through this commission. And not very many days will pass when we will be together, perhaps all masked, but together in the chambers, starting out in 2022. I love you, Kalamazoo. We are adjourned.
Good night, all.